Our story unfolds in a desolate and ruined landscape where the remains of bodies are scattered about. In this grim setting, someone lost in thought admits to themselves that they never expected to feel so powerless again. Their voice is hoarse with coughs, their body bleeding as they remain seated among the rubble. A look of disdain crosses their face as they reflect on their past beliefs, thinking that this time, things would turn out differently. However, their eyes suddenly widen in distress as they take in their surroundings. Their gaze is drawn to a monstrous, towering creature, and they wonder if this moment marks their end. Memories begin to surge in their mind, flooding them with recollections of calling out for their mother in sheer desperation. The images of their past emerge vividly when they were just a child, trapped in the ruins of a collapsed building. They had sobbed in terror as they watched a massive beast consume their mother's body. The haunting image of her struggling, screaming for their help, remains etched in their mind. The recollection ignites something deep inside them, and despite their pain, they rise to their feet with newfound determination. They reflect on what others have told them before, that someone like them, lacking any remarkable talent, could never achieve anything significant. For this young warrior, reaching rank S or even rank A has always been nothing more than an impossible dream. Just as this realization settles in, the monstrous crocodile lets out a deafening roar, its sheer presence overwhelming. Gritting their teeth, the young fighter tightens their grip on the sword's hilt, reaffirming their own nature. They are stubborn, and even in a dire situation like this, they refuse to back down. Resolutely, they declare that the beast will not leave this place alive. The two adversaries charge at one another, both fueled by their own determination and instinct to survive. The young warrior's expression is fierce, unwavering. With all their strength, they swing their sword, striking at the massive creature. The blade makes contact, cutting into flesh, yet the sheer force of the impact sends the young fighter hurtling backward, crashing into a nearby wall. Pain surges through their body, and a low groan escapes their lips. The monster, wounded but not defeated, bellows once more, its cries of agony shaking the surroundings. Struggling to his feet, the protagonist grimaces as he acknowledges the state of his body. His arm is rendered useless, but even so, he remains resolute. He has inflicted a serious wound on the creature, and he cannot afford to stop now. He convinces himself that despite the pain, he must push forward. Determined, he forces himself upright once more. Meanwhile, the monstrous beast writhes in torment from the injury it sustained. Seeing an opportunity, the young warrior takes a deep breath and leaps onto the massive creature's head, showing no hesitation. With unparalleled resolve, he clutches his sword tightly in his mouth, his hands too weak to hold it properly. The beast senses the impending attack and thrashes wildly in an attempt to shake the boy off. Its eyes, gleaming with fury and desperation, fixate on him. Yet, he remains unshaken. He acknowledges that this will be his final strike, the decisive blow. Without another moment's hesitation, he delivers the finishing attack, piercing deep into the monster's body. Blood spurts violently, painting the battlefield in crimson. The monster lets out one last, resounding howl before collapsing, its life finally extinguished. But before the young warrior can celebrate, he is flung from the creature's body, landing harshly on the cold ground. The battlefield falls into silence as a thick smoke billows from the fallen beast's corpse. The sky, dark and foreboding, soon releases a light drizzle, the raindrops mixing with the pools of blood. As the haze clears, a familiar sight comes into view: a bloody hand, barely moving, belonging to the young fighter now lying on the ground. He has survived, but his body is battered and broken. The gigantic monster lies lifeless beside him, its immense form still imposing even in death. A breathy chuckle escapes the young warrior's lips, but it quickly turns into quiet sobs. His laughter mingles with tears of sorrow, regret, and exhaustion. Sometime before this battle, a group had been assembled, and among them, someone had called for attention, urging the others to listen closely before stepping into the portal. They needed to be prepared, as there were troubling rumors about humanoid monsters lurking within. A burly man, his tone laced with apprehension, mentioned that these creatures had the ability to take on human forms, resembling mummies in appearance. He further explained that they were capable of draining mana from their victims. His words carried weight, a stern warning for all. Another individual in the group, speaking in a pompous manner, reiterated the warning, confirming that the rumors were indeed true. But he didn't stop there. His gaze settled on one particular member, Jin Subo. He specifically addressed him, stressing that he, of all people, should remain on high alert. Soon, a mocking voice chimed in, as another man approached Jin with an air of condescension. He feigned concern, pretending to be worried about Jin's safety. The reason for this ridicule was clear: Jin was the only rank B hunter among them. Despite his past achievements, he was still considered weak compared to the others. The man continued his taunting, recalling how Jin had once graduated with the highest marks from his school. He smirked, making a show of expressing admiration, though his words were steeped in mockery. Jin, feeling the discomfort grow within him, clenched his fists, silently enduring the ridicule. The man, unfazed, sarcastically remarked that it was truly an honor to have a genius like Jin among them. Jin, however, found himself lost in thought, wondering how he had ended up in such a position. Once upon a time, he had held the highest score among his peers, a shining beacon of potential. He had been confident that his talent would lead him far, that he would be able to avenge his mother and carve out his place in the world. But at some point, reality had shattered that illusion. No matter how much he trained, it seemed futile. He had begun to realize that he was destined to fail, as if someone had drawn a boundary around him and declared it his limit. Each time he was humiliated, he reassured himself that things would eventually get better. But deep down, he knew better. Time and time again, he had reached his breaking point, yet he still clung to his stubborn persistence. In an attempt to prove himself, he had joined dungeon raids with various groups. Yet each time, he was met with the same treatment, dismissed, mocked, and viewed as nothing more than dead weight. The weight of these experiences weighed heavily on him, and yet something inside him refused to yield. Standing at the entrance of the portal, Jin took a deep breath, his expression unreadable. He took a single step forward, his mind filled with questions. Why was he so obsessed with dungeons when all they brought him was humiliation? Was it the burning desire for vengeance that fueled him? Or was it simply his refusal to accept his own limits? No matter the answer, one truth remained: he was stubborn to the core, and despite everything, he would not stop. With renewed resolve, he ventured forth, prepared to face whatever lay ahead. As soon as he steps through the enormous red portal, an unsettling sensation grips him. The moment he enters, he instinctively shields his face, realizing with horror that this is a mutated portal, an occurrence so rare that it has less than a 1% chance of happening. Before he can even process the implications, a gruesome sight unfolds before him. His entire group is being slaughtered without mercy. Their agonized screams pierce the air, their desperate cries for help filling the chaotic battlefield. The sheer brutality of the massacre shakes him to his core. His eyes dart around in disbelief, his breathing shallow. Among the carnage, he spots one of his companions reaching out, pleading for aid. But before he can react, something crashes violently to the ground beside him. His gaze shifts, and his stomach churns when he realizes what it is: their leader, writhing in unbearable pain, his body mangled beyond recognition. The wounded leader's voice is hoarse as he calls out for help, his terror palpable. The young man's expression darkens. His wide eyes reflect the horror of the moment, but also the weight of a cruel realization. He slowly turns, and it all clicks. This is the same disaster that took his mother's life 10 years ago. Rage bubbles up from the depths of his soul, his fists clenching so tightly that his nails dig into his palms. He grits his teeth, barely able to contain the fury coursing through him. Without hesitation, he summons his sword, gripping it tightly as his resolve solidifies. He refuses to let history repeat itself. He will not run. He will not surrender. Summoning every ounce of courage, he takes a step forward, challenging the monstrous enemies before him. "Come at me," he growls, his voice laced with defiance. But time is unkind. In the future, we see him standing amidst the ruins, staring blankly at another fallen monster. His once fiery resolve flickers as doubt creeps in. "What am I even doing?" he murmurs, his voice barely audible. He knows deep down that this won't bring his parents back. Avenging them won't change the past. His anger alone isn't enough to fill the emptiness inside him. A sharp pain jolts him back to the present. Blood drips from his left eye, the crimson tear falling to the ground with an eerie finality. The moment it touches the earth, a powerful surge of energy erupts. Green lightning crackles violently, spiraling around his body as an ominous aura engulfs him. It is unlike anything he has ever felt before. In the distance, someone observes the strange phenomenon. Is he really their descendant? The mysterious figure mutters, their tone laced with uncertainty. The words barely register in the young man's mind. His thoughts are a jumbled mess, his body overwhelmed by the sheer force of the energy surging through him. And yet, despite the confusion, a small, bitter smile forms on his lips. There's nothing else to be done now. Then, suddenly his eyes snap open. A sharp gasp escapes his lips as he jerks upright, his breath ragged. His surroundings are unfamiliar, his mind disoriented. He frantically looks around, panic setting in. "Where am I?" he mutters, a cold sweat forming on his brow. His thoughts spiral, the question pounding in his skull. Is this the afterlife? A deep, measured voice answers from behind him. No. The young man spins around, startled. Standing before him is a male figure, his presence both commanding and unsettling. The stranger's eyes glow an eerie shade of green, and his expression is unnervingly serene. But it's not just his presence that feels off. His attire is ancient, as though he has stepped out of another time. Jin's gaze narrows, suspicion creeping into his mind. "Who are you?" he asks cautiously. The man studies him for a moment before responding, his tone calm but firm. Your insolence is clearly a result of your chaotic mind, he states matter-of-factly. Then, with a curious tilt of his head, he adds, do you truly not recognize me? Jin blinks, confusion evident in his features. No. Should I? He asks, his voice tinged with frustration. The man exhales sharply, almost as if he finds the boy's ignorance amusing. Before Jin can press further, the stranger reaches out, gripping his chin in a firm but controlled gesture. I am the celestial demon, he declares. His words hang heavily in the air. And you are my only descendant. A stunned silence follows. Jin's mind races, his thoughts colliding with disbelief. He has heard that title before. The celestial demon. The name is legendary, spoken in hushed whispers among those who revel in fantasy and subculture. It is a name associated with power beyond comprehension, a being said to transcend even the heavens. But it had always been fiction, a myth, a fabrication, and yet, here he is, standing face to face with the very being he once dismissed as a story. His fists clench as his mind struggles to grasp the situation. This doesn't make sense, he mutters, his voice laced with uncertainty. His disbelief is evident, but the celestial demon only chuckles, as if entertained by his confusion. I suppose it is difficult to believe, the demon muses. After all, my era and I were long ago reduced to mere legends. But that, my dear boy, is a mistake. You are indeed my descendant. Jin stiffens, a strange sensation creeping over him. His eyes flicker with doubt, but another realization quickly dawns on him. The demon had read his mind. Before he can even voice his thoughts, the ancient being smirks knowingly. That look on your face says it all, the demon remarks. There was no need to read your mind. It was written all over you. Jin scowls, a faint feeling of humiliation settling in. He doesn't know what to make of any of this. But one thing is clear, the overwhelming aura radiating from this man is unlike anything he has ever encountered. It is not magic. It is not any spell he has ever known. It is something far greater. Swallowing his unease, Jin forces himself to ask, why am I here? The celestial demon chuckles darkly. That's ridiculous, he scoffs. Do you honestly believe a mere piece of meat like yourself holds any value? Know your place, boy. You are nothing more than a useless creature. Jin's jaw tightens, but before he can react, the demon's expression shifts into something more serious. I am searching for another demon, he reveals, his tone laced with disdain. The blood demon, my nemesis, a persistent thorn in my side. Because of him, I am trapped in this wretched state. If he were to seize control of another demon's body, it would be a catastrophe. His eyes glint with a dangerous idea. A slow, malevolent smile spreads across his lips. But, he continues, I've just had a thought. Jin instinctively tenses. What are you talking about? He demands. The demon steps closer, his voice smooth and confident. You are my descendant, he states simply, which means you must have a useful body. A chill runs down Jin's spine as the realization dawns on him. Before he can react, the demon places a firm hand on his shoulder. Hand over your body, he commands. Jin's breath catches in his throat. Shock and fear flicker across his face, his instincts screaming at him to run. The celestial demon, however, seems entirely unfazed. Consider it an honorable act, he muses. I will return to the world, and you'll be reduced to nothing. But before he can say another word, Jin abruptly slaps his hand away. Like hell I would, he snaps. For a moment, silence lingers. Then, a suffocating pressure crashes down upon Jin, the weight of the demon's aura pinning him in place. The celestial demon's eyes glow ominously. Have you forgotten your place, boy? He murmurs, his tone laced with a dangerous edge. You have no choice. The moment the celestial demon's fingers snapped, everything changed. A thick, suffocating aura enveloped Jin, and the world around him twisted into something unfamiliar. It was as if reality itself had been rewritten in an instant. The pressure in the air grew heavier, weighing down on his body, but before he could even comprehend where he was, a voice rang out, a voice so soft, so hauntingly familiar that his entire body froze. It was his mother's voice, calling out to him from the depths of this strange space. His heart clenched, and an involuntary shiver ran down his spine. This wasn't possible. His mother had been gone for 10 years. The memory had seared itself into his mind, twisting into an unrelenting nightmare. There had been moments, so many of them, where he had convinced himself that it would have been better if he had died alongside her. If he had been taken too, at least he wouldn't have had to live through the years of emptiness that followed. If he had perished that day, he wouldn't have grown up haunted by the weight of failure. A miserable life awaited him after that night. A life where people whispered about him behind his back, where the weight of their expectations had crushed him long before he ever had a chance to prove himself. He had stood before countless eyes, the disappointment in their gazes confirming what he already knew. They believed he had reached his limit. He had ranked 35th, an insignificant number, a place for the hopeless. Being a hunter depended on talent, and without it, he was nothing. Those who watched from afar had already made their judgment. He was a fool for persisting, for trying, for refusing to accept his fate. They believed he should have given up long ago, that it was laughable how he still clung to a dream he had no right to chase. His teeth clenched at the thought. What did they know? None of them had lived his life, had felt the pain of that night over and over again. None of them had endured the years of training, the endless struggle to get even a step ahead. It wasn't talent that had brought him this far, it was his own blood, sweat, and sheer effort. Every day had been a battle against his own weaknesses, against the memories that threatened to drown him. Those people, those faceless voices, had no idea what he had endured. And yet, their words still burned, because deep down a part of him had feared they were right. His rage was growing now, a storm swirling inside him. The image of that monstrous creature resurfaced in his mind, but this time, it wasn't just the beast that he hated. It was the world that had decided his worth, the people who had dismissed him, the system that had told him he would never be more than he was. The celestial demon watched him closely, feeding off his growing fury, urging him to let it take over. He whispered promises of revenge, of power, of a future where he would no longer be weak. With the strength he was being offered, he could destroy everything that had ever held him back. He could rise above those who mocked him, could tear apart the beast that had ruined his life, and, most importantly, he could ensure that no one else would ever see him as worthless again. Then, suddenly, something changed. His surroundings shifted once more, and he found himself staring at a figure kneeling before him, their body trembling. His blood ran cold. His mother, there she was, in front of him again. Her lips moved, her voice shaking as she called his name. But something was different. This time she wasn't urging him to hide or to run. She was questioning him, asking why he had left her behind. She accused him of being a coward, of abandoning her when she needed him most. Her words were like daggers, piercing through his chest, carving deeper into old wounds. He felt his breath catch, his body locked in place. The celestial demon spoke again, pressing him forward, telling him not to hesitate. He reminded him that this was his mother, and if he let her suffer once more, he would be abandoning her all over again. The words slithered into his mind, sowing doubt, urging him to move. The long-haired man beside him placed a supportive hand on his shoulder, as if to assure him that this was the only choice. Jin took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest, and then he stopped. Something about this was wrong. The doubt that had gnawed at him before now surged forward with full force. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to think, to remember. His mother had never blamed him. Not once. Even in her final moments, as she had faced death itself, she had only wanted him to survive. She had screamed at him to run, not because she saw him as weak, but because she had loved him. That was the kind of person she had been. Selfless, strong, determined to protect him even when her own life was slipping away. This thing in front of him wasn't her. It was an illusion, a trick, an insult to her memory. His jaw tightened, and with renewed resolve, he stepped back. The dark creature beside him faltered, confusion flickering across its face. And then, with a single motion, Jin tore through the mirage, shattering the false image of his mother into nothingness. The celestial demon's gaze sharpened, irritation flashing in his eyes. He hadn't expected this. He had assumed that the boy was weak, that his emotions would chain him down. But now, the atmosphere around Jin had changed entirely. He was no longer the same trembling, uncertain child. His spirit had hardened, his mind had cleared, and the fury in his heart was no longer something that could be controlled. The celestial demon watched for a long moment before letting out a low, amused chuckle. He admitted defeat. The boy had passed the test. Jin wasted no time. His voice was steady as he demanded to know how to become stronger. The celestial demon's smirk remained, though his irritation lingered beneath the surface. He told the boy that he was too eager, that true power was not something obtained in an instant. There was a long road ahead, a process that couldn't be skipped. Jin frowned, his impatience evident, but before he could argue, the demon spoke again. He stated that for now he would not take the boy's body. However, the threat remained if, one day, Jin came crawling back to him, begging for power. Then the deal would be reconsidered. Jin narrowed his eyes, skeptical of the demon's words. He knew this being could not be trusted, that hesitation on his part would mean losing everything. But for now, he had no choice. He agreed to uphold his part of the deal, as long as the celestial demon did the same. Satisfied, the demon finally revealed what lay ahead. Jin found himself alone, his surroundings shifting once again, the energy around him pressing in from all directions. He could feel something stirring within him, something unfamiliar yet powerful. A voice rang out, telling him to feel honored to serve. Before he could fully grasp what was happening, movement caught his eye. A blade cut through the air, flying toward him at an alarming speed. Instinct took over and Jin barely managed to dodge it. His body moved before his mind could catch up, confusion swirling in his thoughts. What was this place? What was happening? The celestial demon's voice echoed once more, declaring that an exception would be made. Jin would be allowed to use his power, but before he could wield it, he had a first task to fight. And his first battle would be against the ones known as the Worms of the Blood Cult. The man standing before him, face blank and devoid of any emotion, silently raised his blade. Without hesitation, he charged forward, his intent to kill unmistakable. Jin barely had a moment to react before the voice of the celestial demon echoed in his mind, commanding him to slaughter them all. His instincts flared, and his hands moved before his thoughts could catch up. Gripping the sword that had flown toward him moments earlier, he swung, cutting cleanly through the attacking man. As the body collapsed, Jin realized something was off. His opponent had not been fighting with his own will. There was no hesitation in his movements, no resistance, just an empty shell being controlled like a puppet. The other cult members who had witnessed the scene took a step back, fear flashing in their eyes. The system promptly notified him of an unexpected occurrence. He had absorbed the spirit of the fallen man, something that had never happened before. Before he could process this, the celestial demon's voice rang out once again, asking what he thought of this new strength. Jin hesitated, momentarily confused, but his attention snapped back to the situation at hand as he suddenly became aware of a new skill tree appearing before him. The realization struck he had acquired a fragment of the celestial demon's martial arts. The weight of what this meant pressed on him, but there was no time for hesitation. The remaining cult members still surrounded him, their eyes filled with hostility, and he could sense the killing intent in the air. Raising his blade, Jin stepped forward, and with a speed he hadn't known was possible, he cut down the cult members effortlessly. Each strike was precise, clean, and devastating. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced before. He moved with an instinct that felt foreign yet natural at the same time. As he carved through his enemies, his thoughts swirled. The power coursing through him was unreal. Was this truly the might of the celestial demon? The evil being confirmed his suspicions, but with a cruel smirk. He remarked that this was nothing more than a drop of his true power. The more Jin accepted it, the larger that drop would become. Jin gritted his teeth. He had no intention of fully embracing the influence of the celestial demon. He knew that allowing himself to be consumed by this power would mean losing himself entirely. No matter how tempting it was, he refused to walk that path. He forced himself to focus, knowing that right now, the only thing that mattered was cutting down the enemies before him. His gaze shifted to the system window, scanning the skills now available to him. Without hesitation, he activated Rank, Ice Spear, forming two sharp projectiles of ice and hurling them toward two cult disciples. The attack landed flawlessly, freezing them in place, and before they could react, he followed up with a precise strike from his blade, finishing them both in an instant. The system acknowledged his actions, informing him that he had executed consecutive ice-based skills. His confidence surged as he realized that this combination of magic and swordsmanship was unlike anything he had done before. Without pausing, he dashed toward the remaining enemies, wielding his blade with newfound precision. The battle was swift, and one by one, his enemies fell. By the time the last cultist collapsed, the battlefield had gone eerily silent. Jin took a shaky breath, lowering his sword, realizing he had sustained only a minor injury, a shallow cut on his cheek. It wasn't much, but the celestial demon took notice. Intrigued by how well Jin had maintained his concentration, the demon watched him carefully, an amused glint in his eyes. He mused that if he were to take full control of Jin's body, he would be able to shape him into something far greater. However, despite his new power, Jin was still just a novice. The overwhelming number of enemies had been too much for someone at his level, and the celestial demon remarked that he couldn't allow him to die just yet. Before Jin could react, the demon offered his assistance, but Jin immediately rejected it. He refused to become dependent on something that would ultimately destroy him. But the celestial demon was not one to be denied. His voice carried an undeniable authority as he ordered Jin to drop his sword. A powerful shock ran through Jin's body, seizing control of his movements. His fingers involuntarily loosened their grip, and the weapon fell to the ground with a dull clatter. Panic surged through him as he realized he could no longer move. His mind raced, desperately questioning what the long-haired man intended to do. The cultists, seeing this opening, wasted no time in launching an attack. The celestial demon's voice remained calm, unbothered by the situation. He spoke as if this were all a mere lesson, telling Jin that, in the Morim world, everything depended on one's steps. Then, without warning, a dark aura began to surge from Jin's chest. His eyes widened as an overwhelming force flooded his body. His pupils, once filled with uncertainty, shifted darkness overtook them, transforming them into the very same eyes as the demon himself. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. A powerful surge of energy erupted around him, and the first art of the celestial demon activated the dominating step. As Jin took a single step forward, an immense black aura radiated outward, swallowing everything in its path. The overwhelming pressure suffocated the air, crushing everything in its vicinity. The cultists, once eager to strike, found themselves unable to move. Their bodies trembled violently as an unbearable force pressed down on them. The sheer weight of the energy was so intense that their skin began to peel away, their flesh disintegrating under the sheer pressure of Jin's presence. Within moments, their bodies collapsed into nothingness, erased from existence. Jin stood at the center of it all, his breathing ragged, his limbs heavy. The overwhelming power left him shaken. His mind struggled to process what had just happened. Had he truly been capable of doing that? Had he really erased his enemies with a mere step? The celestial demon, however, was unimpressed. His voice carried an air of disappointment as he scolded Jin for thinking too highly of himself. That level of destruction was not something that had come from his own strength. It had been borrowed power, something far beyond his current capabilities. He was still nothing more than a weak vessel, barely capable of wielding a fraction of what the celestial demon could offer. A sudden movement caught Jin's attention. Before he could react, a shot fired across his vision. His body tensed as he felt the last remnants of his strength drain away. His legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees. His breathing was labored, his consciousness slipping. The edges of his vision blurred, and as he stared at the celestial demon's face, a sickening realization crept over him. The long-haired man's expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something sinister. Had Jin been deceived? Before he could think any further, the system interrupted his fading thoughts, informing him that he had acquired 124 blood phantoms, increasing his proficiency in the celestial demon's divine art. His vision darkened, and everything faded. When he next opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was a familiar ceiling. A sudden wave of panic surged through him as he shot upright, a scream escaping his lips. His chest heaved as he struggled to piece together what had just happened. A mocking chuckle echoed beside him. The celestial demon, leaning casually nearby, smirked in amusement. Jin's panic deepened as he instinctively checked himself, expecting the worst. But his body was still his own. The celestial demon scoffed, reminding him that he wasn't someone who broke promises. Jin exhaled sharply, his unease far from gone. He wasn't sure whether the demon's honesty was something to be relieved about or something to fear. The long-haired man simply told him to be quiet, dismissing his concerns with ease. Jin remained cautious but couldn't shake the nagging thought in his mind. Had he been able to use that power because, for a brief moment, the demon had taken control of him? The possibility unsettled him. But before he could voice his concerns, the celestial demon merely smirked once more, reveling in the confusion that clouded his young descendant's mind. Jin remained silent for a moment as the celestial demon once again asked if he would surrender his body. The question was spoken with a smooth, almost teasing confidence, as if the answer was inevitable, as if it was only a matter of time. But without hesitation, Jin's response came firm and unwavering no. There was no room for doubt in his voice, no hesitation. He would never hand over his body, no matter the circumstances. The demon chuckled, unfazed by the rejection, and instead shifted the conversation, asking what Jin thought of the power he had just wielded. For a second, Jin hesitated. He wanted to deny it, wanted to resist the very thought of acknowledging its influence. But the truth was undeniable. It was more powerful than he had ever imagined. Even he couldn't refute that. Reluctantly, he admitted that while he despised the source, the strength itself was incredible, even greater than he had anticipated. The celestial demon smirked at the confession, calling it a mere fraction of the true power of his martial art. He reminded Jin that, in his time, he had once been called the Sovereign, a title that carried untold weight and authority. The name itself held echoes of a past filled with domination and destruction. Jin absorbed the words but remained focused on his goal. He needed to avenge his parents, and for that, he needed power, true, undeniable power. He could no longer afford to be weak. The celestial demon acknowledged this path, stating that to gain true strength, Jin would have to continue killing blood demons and absorbing their internal energy. That was the only way forward. Jin clenched his fists, already resolved, but the demon once again pushed the question: if he was willing to go that far, then why not surrender his body entirely? The idea was presented as if it were the simplest and most logical decision. But Jin had no intention of becoming a mere vessel. He refused once again, declaring with absolute certainty that he would be the one to wield the demon's power, not the other way around. Without hesitation, he reached for the IV connected to his arm and ripped it out, the sudden action drawing blood as the needle was forcefully removed from his vein. The celestial demon observed this act of defiance with amusement. This was interesting, far more interesting than he had anticipated. Watching his descendant struggle, push forward, and evolve on his own was far more entertaining than simply taking over his body. He wished Jin good luck, stating that there would be plenty of opportunities in the future. After all, time was always on his side. Jin knew that he was walking a dangerous path, He knew that, sooner or later, he might not be able to hold his own against the demon's influence. But, right now, that didn't matter. He had grown stronger, and he wouldn't stop. No matter how dangerous this road became, he would not give up on his revenge. He wouldn't let anyone tell him otherwise. With a confident smirk, he reaffirmed his path, knowing that his life was about to change forever. Just then, the door to his hospital room swung open, and a voice called out to him. A woman entered, her expression filled with a mixture of irritation and concern. She immediately stated that she had heard he nearly died. Jin narrowed his eyes, immediately recognizing her. The moment he saw her face, the memories resurfaced. Xian. The blue-haired woman took a seat near his bed, arms crossed, scanning him with sharp eyes before casually remarking that he looked better than she expected. Meanwhile, in another location, an entirely different conversation was unfolding. A man in an office setting received an urgent call, notifying him that the management team was on the line. The atmosphere in the room was tense as a group of individuals discussed the emergence of the mutated portal. Everyone was on high alert, their focus solely on the recent disaster. The apparent leader of the group asked for a full report and confirmed that they would provide full coverage of the event. Another man questioned what had been discussed, to which one of the individuals explained that this was the 8th known case of an incident where a monster drained mana from hunters. Not only that, but the sudden appearance of a mutated portal had only added to the chaos. The news outlets would have plenty to report on, and the implications of this event could not be ignored. Someone in the room noted that they hadn't even known that a portal could form in that location. The boss scoffed at the incompetence of those responsible for monitoring such occurrences, criticizing the fact that they had allowed this to happen. Another man confirmed this, then hesitated before bringing up another matter, the portal survivor. The boss's expression shifted into confusion. A survivor? He hadn't been informed of this. But the moment he heard the name Jin Suo leave the man's lips, his entire demeanor changed. The name alone sent a flood of memories crashing through his mind. He vividly recalled the time he had lost to the rookie Jin Suo. The realization hit him hard. The portal survivor was none other than the same student who had once surpassed him back in school. A mixture of surprise and frustration settled in as he processed the information. A smile formed on his lips, but it was accompanied by a sharp exhale as he acknowledged that he hadn't expected this. Another individual in the room commented on the absurdity of Jin's continued survival, suggesting that he simply had too much luck. The boss remained silent for a moment before scoffing at his colleague's bitterness, reminding him that they had graduated a long time ago, and yet he still held a grudge. As the discussion continued, the boss leaned back, reminiscing about the past. What stood out the most in his memories of Jin Suo were his eyes. There had been something deeply unsettling about them, something terrifying. He pulled out a cigarette, exhaling in irritation, cursing under his breath at the sheer persistence of that boy. Even now, Jin continued his reckless dungeon expeditions, despite being on the verge of death time and time again. Back in the hospital room, Jin kept his expression unreadable as he faced Cheon. The woman seemed somewhat impressed that he still remembered her name, but before she could say anything more, he cut her off coldly, making it clear that he had nothing to say to her. Cheon sighed before apologizing, then shifted the conversation to something she had been meaning to tell him. With a serious tone, she told him that he needed to stop being a hunter. She had said it before, and she would keep saying it. He simply didn't have the skills for it. Jin barely reacted, his face devoid of any emotion. He had heard this argument from her before, and he had already told her to stay out of his business. He had no interest in repeating the conversation. Cheon, however, wasn't ready to drop it just yet. She stated that she was only telling him the truth, but Jin couldn't care less. He simply wanted her to leave. Cheon's frustration grew as she pointed out that he had almost died again. How many times would it take before he realized that this wasn't the life for him? But before she could say anything else, Jin silenced her with a sharp demand to leave. His tone left no room for argument. He had no intention of listening to her warnings, no matter how many times she repeated them. The blue-haired woman bit her lower lip in frustration. For a moment, it seemed like she wanted to say more, to press the issue further. But in the end, she simply let out a small sigh, accepting his stubbornness. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving him alone once more. The celestial demon broke the silence, his voice laced with amusement as he asked who the girl was. Jin, unwilling to entertain the conversation, simply told him to shut up. His expression darkened, his mind clouded by bad memories. He didn't want to think about Cheon or her unnecessary concern. Outside the hospital, Cheon leaned against the sleek limousine, her eyes distant. Her bodyguard approached and asked if she had managed to talk to him, but she only admitted that she hadn't. The man suggested that it would be easier if she was direct, if she simply told Jin that she was worried about him. But Cheon dismissed the idea. She knew it wouldn't make a difference. He wouldn't change, even if she said it outright. With a quiet sigh, she told the bodyguard not to concern himself with it, and both of them stepped into the car. As they drove off, the conversation shifted to the next expedition, which was scheduled for the following day. Back in his hospital room, an oppressive, dark aura spread through the space. Jin was cultivating, his entire focus locked onto his training. Beads of sweat dripped down his face, his body exhausted, but he didn't stop. His breathing was ragged as he pushed himself further, his mind fully immersed in mastering internal energy. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he opened his eyes. A deep sense of satisfaction settled over him. He had finally acquired the mental technique of internal energy from the celestial demon's divine art. However, just as he felt the weight of his accomplishment, the celestial demon's voice cut through his thoughts. The long-haired man seemed slightly tense but quickly masked it with mockery, calling him slow for taking so long to learn something so basic. Jin, too drained to argue, merely muttered that he was tired and told the demon to shut up. But the demon's gaze lingered on him, an unusual curiosity hidden beneath his smirk. He called Jin a psychopath for learning the technique so quickly. Even as his descendant, this level of growth was unexpected. It was strange, even to him. There was something about Jin that even he couldn't fully understand. Sometime later, Jin stood in front of a portal, studying its glowing entrance with mild skepticism. He asked if this was really the right place. The celestial demon confirmed it was, explaining that it was a portal typically used for training beginner hunters, those ranked at F tier. However, the spirit also assured him that he could smell the presence of a blood demon here, making it certain that something far more dangerous lurked inside. Jin remained doubtful, unable to understand why a creature like that would drain energy from novice hunters. But the demon merely dismissed his questions, stating that there was no need to understand, only to kill. As the two observed their surroundings, Jin noted the number of people gathering near the blue portal. There were quite a few teams present, all preparing for entry. Before he could take another step, a man approached him, scanning him with suspicion before confirming his identity. He introduced himself as a rank B hunter, but there was a slight tension in his body language. He then questioned whether Jin was aware that this was a rank F portal, as if implying he had made a mistake. Jin calmly replied that he had his own reasons for being there. The man, quickly masking his unease with a fake smile, nodded in understanding. Nearby, two novice hunters whispered among themselves. One asked why Jin was there, only for another to respond with recognition. He explained that Jin Suo was famous not for success, but for his reputation as an aspiring hunter who had never succeeded. The moment the words were spoken, there was a shift in the atmosphere. Others in the group began murmuring, some chuckling under their breath. One of them speculated that Jin was probably trying to relive his past reputation by standing among the new hunters, an act of desperation rather than confidence. They pitied him, seeing all his hard work as meaningless. But in the end, they concluded, it didn't really matter. Life simply wasn't fair to everyone. Jin heard it all but remained silent, his gaze fixed on the portal. His mind drifted for a brief moment, recalling how he used to enter dungeons with excitement, fueled by the hope that one day he would become strong enough to change his fate. Those days felt like a lifetime ago. The celestial demon, however, scoffed at his thoughts, disgusted by how much his descendant still clung to his past glory. Jin snapped back to reality, his irritation growing as he told the demon to stay out of his mind. But the long-haired man only chuckled darkly, claiming that Jin had made an amusing and pathetic expression just now. Then, with a sharp tone, he scolded him. How could he claim to be using the demon's power for revenge when he was still stuck in his past? The words hammered into Jin's mind, pressing down on his thoughts like an unbearable weight. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The truth of those words was something he wasn't ready to confront. Before he could sink too deeply into his own thoughts, however, someone approached him. A girl. She hesitated before speaking, her voice uncertain. Jin turned to her, his expression unreadable, and asked what she needed. The girl seemed embarrassed at first, but after a moment of hesitation, she finally gathered the courage to ask him for an autograph. Jin stared at her, utterly confused. In all his years, this had never happened before. He had never been the kind of hunter that people admired, let alone one who received autograph requests. Before he could question her, she quickly reassured him that he hadn't misheard. She genuinely wanted an autograph. But just as Jin processed her words, his eyes shifted beyond her. A group of people nearby had taken notice of the exchange and immediately began whispering amongst themselves. He heard the muttered insults, the mocking tones. Some sneered at the girl, questioning why she would ask for an autograph from someone like him. Others scoffed, calling Jin a talented bum, a man who had once had potential but had amounted to nothing. Jin turned his gaze back to the girl, his expression dark. He told her bluntly that it wouldn't be a good idea for her to ask for his autograph, that she should reconsider, but the girl was undeterred. She quickly explained that her request had nothing to do with his rank. She wasn't some naive fan, she was a survivor. She was one of the people who had been trapped in the dungeon that Jin had completed. If it weren't for him, she wouldn't be alive right now. Jin blinked. genuinely taken aback. He had never thought much about his actions in that dungeon. He had been too caught up in his own survival to consider what had happened to the others. But hearing it now from someone who had lived because of him made something stir inside him. He had actually saved someone. For the longest time, Jin had believed himself to be incompetent, someone who couldn't even protect a single person. He had assumed that every battle he fought had been meaningless, that every struggle had led to nothing. But hearing the girl's gratitude, knowing that his actions had saved at least one life, something inside him shifted. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He told the girl that he would sign the autograph, but later, after they completed the portal. The girl looked momentarily disheartened, assuming that he had just brushed her off. But when he clarified that he would keep his word, just after they got through the dungeon, her eyes lit up with genuine happiness. She quickly bowed, expressing her gratitude once more, and her friend rushed over, practically bouncing with excitement. Jin overheard her friend exclaim that this was the best day of her life. He exhaled slightly, shaking his head, wondering if he really deserved such admiration. Turning away from the momentary exchange, he refocused on what truly mattered. He asked the celestial demon whether only a rank A or higher could fight against a blood phantom. The demon immediately confirmed it, explaining that even stronger monsters than that would be present within the portal. Jin's mind sharpened as he quickly scanned the group around him. Most of the hunters entering this portal were rank C at best, completely unprepared for what lay ahead. That realization settled heavily in his chest, and his instincts flared. If he didn't step in, every single one of them would die. The celestial demon confirmed his fears, remarking that it was already certain. Without hesitation, Jin steadied himself. He wouldn't let that happen. He wouldn't betray their trust, not on the first day of his new path. A commanding voice broke through the murmurs of the gathered hunters. A woman stepped forward, addressing the group as she announced that those participating would now be introduced to their assigned leader. She introduced Kang Bul, a rank B hunter, who would be in charge of their team for the day. The hunters muttered among themselves, some clearly impressed. The woman emphasized that having someone like him here was a rare opportunity and that they should pay close attention to what they could learn. The group responded with quick confirmations, eager to begin. Then, the woman added that they had a special guest. The name rang through the air like a small explosion, Jin Suo. The atmosphere subtly shifted as the announcement was made. She claimed that with his participation, there shouldn't be any trouble. Jin didn't react outwardly, but he could already sense the scrutiny that was now on him. Kang Bul approached, extending his hand toward Jin with a seemingly polite smile. "It's an honor to meet you," he said smoothly. Jin hesitated for a fraction of a second before shaking his hand, but the moment their palms met, his expression hardened. Something about this man was off. As he looked into the older hunter's eyes, he saw something behind that friendly exterior, a subtle challenge. Kang Bul's smile was just a mask. Jin quickly assessed him, wondering if this man genuinely wanted to pick a fight with him. Unbeknownst to him, Kang Bul was making his own silent observations. He had heard of Jin Suo's past, of how he had once been highly regarded but had ultimately failed to achieve anything great. To him, Jin was nothing more than a relic of past rumors, a hunter who had been hyped up but had never lived up to the expectations set before him. Kang Bul believed that if he outperformed Jin here, if he proved himself as the better hunter, he could secure a promotion. That thought alone made him smirk slightly, already considering how to make the most of this opportunity. Soon, the time to enter the portal arrived. As they stepped through, those at the front surveyed the area. The environment appeared still, eerily empty. Some of the novices murmured that the place felt colder than expected, a strange sensation lingering in the air. Uneasiness settled over them, but Kang Bul quickly dismissed their concerns, telling them to relax. He assured them that this was only a rank F portal and that as long as they followed his instructions, they would be fine. Jin's eyes narrowed at the blatant lie. He could tell at a glance that this was no rank F portal. He knew what true rank F dungeons felt like, and this wasn't one of them. The celestial demon confirmed his suspicions, stating that this was normal people always miscalculated their dangers, no matter the era. Jin clenched his fists slightly. He already understood the truth. The moment they had entered, it was no longer about classification. Only one guest was truly wanted here. No matter what he said, nothing would change. That was why he needed to use this useless instructor while he still could. Without hesitation, Jin spoke up, feigning compliance. He declared that he would follow orders, but suggested that someone should be placed in the rear guard. Kang Bul hesitated for a moment, then gave an awkward smile before agreeing, saying it was a basic strategy. The man's mind worked quickly, wondering if Jin was actually competent or if his skills were just a facade. Regardless, he took the lead, instructing everyone to stay close. He continued to motivate them, speaking as if they would only be facing weak monsters. The celestial demon scoffed at Kang Bul's arrogance, calling him a complete idiot. Jin told him to shut up, but the demon's tone turned sarcastic, questioning whether everything would really be okay. The spirit then mocked Jin further, saying that surely he had noticed the real danger hidden within this portal. Jin's breath hitched slightly at those words. He asked the demon to clarify, but the long-haired man simply smiled darkly. The answer was obvious. A sinking feeling gripped Jin's chest, his senses sharpened and his muscles tensed. He demanded to know where the danger was coming from. The celestial demon's smirk widened as he leaned in slightly, his voice low and amused. "It's directly beneath you." At that exact moment, the ground beneath them cracked. A red spirit emerged from the fissure, its presence radiating malice. Jin reacted instantly, dodging by a hair's breadth as the force of the eruption sent debris flying. The moment he regained his footing, he shouted a single command: "Run." Panic erupted in the group as screams filled the air. The weaker hunters scattered in all directions, chaos breaking loose as they scrambled to escape. Before Jin could think, his instincts flared again. A girl was in danger. Without hesitation, he turned back, his sword flashing through the air as he slashed at the spirit, saving her at the last second. His breath came fast and uneven. The danger in front of him was real, far greater than he had anticipated. Then he saw it. A body was flung violently to the ground. His entire body froze. It was Kangbul. The rank B hunter lay motionless, his body crumpled in a heap. A sharp gasp of horror filled the air as one of the women screamed. Her voice was raw with disbelief and fear as she watched her supposed leader die before her very eyes. And then, behind the fallen man's body, it stood there. A twisted smile curled upon the lips of the being that had struck him down, but behind that malicious grin, a single tear rolled down its face. Jin's breath hitched as he watched the possessed girl, his mind struggling to reconcile the sight before him. The tear that slipped down her cheek contradicted everything he understood about the monstrous nature of blood phantoms. The creatures were ruthless, void of emotion, driven by instinct alone. And yet, here she was, sobbing even as she advanced with a blade in hand. It shook him, but there was no time for hesitation. She lunged forward, grief twisting her face into something both terrifying and heartbreaking. Jin reacted instantly, using a controlled strike to redirect her attack rather than countering it directly. The force sent her staggering backward, giving him the chance to shout a desperate command: "Run." His voice rang through the battlefield, urging the remaining survivors to flee while they still had a chance. Some hesitated, frozen by fear, but his urgency snapped them into action. They turned and bolted for the exit, leaving him alone to face the possessed girl. His body remained tense, fully aware that the next strike could be fatal. As he adjusted his stance, something clicked in his senses, a certainty he could no longer ignore. This girl was a blood phantom, there was no doubt about it. But something else gnawed at him. How long had she been possessed? He expected the answer to be years, perhaps months, but the celestial demon's voice confirmed otherwise. The possession had only occurred recently. Jin's eyes widened in disbelief. It didn't make sense. Could someone transform into a blood phantom so quickly? The demon provided no further explanation, merely watching as Jin processed the horrifying reality. Pushing aside his questions, he refocused on the fight, narrowly blocking another attack. Using the momentum, he put more distance between himself and the girl, trying to assess the situation. The celestial demon spoke again, his tone unbothered as he reiterated his earlier warning. The girl had only changed the moment she set foot inside this place. Jin demanded to know if the demon recognized the dungeon, and the long-haired entity confirmed that he did. He explained that this was one of the countless prisons created by the blood phantoms, a place known as the Mirror of Sins and Evil Deeds. Before Jin could process the full weight of that name, the girl charged at him again, dagger in hand. He dodged smoothly, but the celestial demon took the opportunity to elaborate. He stated that the people trapped in this dungeon had been turning into monsters since ancient times. Jin's thoughts raced, trying to make sense of it all. He gritted his teeth, demanding an explanation. Why had the girl turned? What was her sin? The answer came without hesitation. She had committed murder. Jin's body stiffened at the revelation. His mind immediately recoiled, refusing to accept it. The words rang in his ears, bouncing inside his skull, trying to settle into a reality he didn't want to acknowledge. She had killed someone? It didn't make sense. He had met her. He had saved her. She had smiled at him with gratitude, with sincerity. That wasn't the expression of a murderer. He turned to look at her, searching for any sign that the demon might be wrong, that this was all some kind of mistake, and then a blade came flying toward him. Jin reacted too late, barely shifting in time. The dagger cut across his cheek, a sharp sting reminding him that this was real. He quickly refocused, watching her as she stood with her weapon ready, her face void of the warmth he once remembered. The celestial demon seemed to take delight in his confusion, his smirk evident in his voice as he spoke. But this time, instead of mocking him, he offered something else: clarity. See for yourself. Before Jin could question him, the world shattered around him. The system abruptly informed him that an unknown power had been activated. The announcement was followed by another time itself has shattered. Then, the final message came, displaying target's memories. The battlefield faded, and suddenly, Jin was no longer in the dungeon. It was nighttime, and he stood in a different place entirely. Before him, a corpse lay on the ground, its lifeless form illuminated by the dim glow of a street lamp, and next to it, her. The girl who had asked for his autograph. She held a knife in her trembling hands, her breathing ragged. Then, slowly, as if the weight of what she had done finally crashed down on her, she dropped the blade. Tears spilled from her eyes as a broken smile formed on her lips, her body trembling uncontrollably. She confessed her crimes, her voice barely above a whisper. And then, she revealed the truth: the bodies before her belonged to her father and mother. Jin's stomach twisted into knots. He wanted to look away, to reject what he was seeing, but he couldn't. The scene continued. The girl turned to the side, her eyes landing on a mirror. For a brief moment, silence engulfed everything. Then she vomited. Something inside her broke. The memories blurred, distorting as if the system itself was struggling to contain them. The next thing Jin knew, he was back in the dungeon. He gasped, his eyes wide as he struggled to process what he had just witnessed. His mind screamed for an explanation. Why? Why had she done it? The celestial demon whispered beside him, watching as his descendant reeled from the revelation. He encouraged Jin to kill her. She was trying to kill him after all, and she was a murderer. But Jin couldn't move. The weight of it all crushed him, rendering him motionless. His eyes locked onto the girl's tear-streaked face. Despite everything, he hesitated. His mind flickered back to their first meeting, to the way she had smiled, to the moment she had told him she was only alive because of him. That moment had been real. Her gratitude had been genuine. How could someone like that be a killer? She lunged again, but Jin dodged, his movements sluggish. A cry rang out. She fell to the ground, groaning in pain. His body reacted on instinct, and before he could think, he dropped his weapon. The celestial demon stirred in irritation. He didn't understand Jin's actions. He demanded an answer. Why? Why was he sparing her? Jin's breath was heavy, but his eyes were steady. He wasn't acting on pity, he was acting on conviction. He had been told that he needed power to avoid running away, to never relive the helplessness of his past. But the same logic applied here. He needed power to uncover the truth. Strength wasn't just about killing. It was about having the resolve to face reality. The celestial demon was momentarily taken aback. Jin's conviction impressed him. Jin knew he could kill her easily. The thought wasn't even in question. But if that was the only way out, then he would be left with nothing but regret. If he accepted that logic, he would be nothing more than the celestial demon's pawn. That wasn't the path he wanted. He had to know the truth. He had to believe in something greater than just killing. Green energy pulsed around his heart, wrapping him in the celestial demon's aura. Jin took a single step forward, his mind unwavering. If this world demanded that he kill without question, without searching for answers, then he didn't deserve to live in it. With his palm glowing, he made his choice. He wouldn't kill her, and if that meant he had to fight the entire system itself, so be it. The celestial demon watched in stunned silence as Jin took his stance, defying every expectation. He couldn't comprehend what his descendant was doing. The boy had yet to even grasp the fundamental divine foundation of the celestial demon's divine art, and yet he was willing to risk his life for a mere stranger. It was reckless, foolish, and absurd, but most of all, it was something the demon hadn't anticipated. His voice echoed in Jin's mind, questioning his intentions, unable to suppress his disbelief. Yet before he could continue, Jin cut him off with a sharp command. Shut up. He had already made it clear he would handle this on his own. In that moment, the celestial demon realized something. His descendant wasn't just resisting his influence, he was ascending, pushing beyond the limits placed upon him. His presence, his aura, his sheer willpower. It was beginning to resemble that of a true master. The manifestation of energy around him wasn't merely accidental, it was intentional. The long-haired spirit's amusement faltered as he watched Jin's form, no longer looking like a mere vessel, but someone forging his own path. On the ground, the girl stirred, pain evident in her eyes, but her thoughts were focused only on one thing: him. She called out to Jin, desperation in her voice. She pleaded with him to run, to escape while he still could. But his expression remained unwavering. His voice was calm but firm as he declared that he would not leave her behind. The sincerity of his words made her heart tremble, but the monster within her did not hesitate. It surged forward with unrelenting fury, using her body as a weapon to strike him down. Jin met her charge head-on, but instead of countering with a lethal attack, he did something no one expected. He stopped her with his bare hand. The young woman's eyes widened in shock. No one had ever held her back so effortlessly before, and yet, he did. He looked directly into her conflicted gaze and asked a simple yet profound question. Do you not want to be saved? The weight of those words reached her heart, piercing through the corruption that had taken root. For a moment, a flicker of resistance appeared in her expression, but it was too late to stop the clash. Both of them struck with immense force, and the explosion of energy that followed sent them flying apart. The impact left Jin breathless as he landed hard on his feet, struggling to maintain balance. The girl, however, was thrown backward, crashing onto her knees, gasping for breath. Jin grimaced, acknowledging what his ancestor had said earlier. He truly had no foundation in the celestial demon's divine art. Without proper mastery, he was walking the razor's edge, barely surviving each encounter. But the blood phantom within the girl was enraged. It refused to be overpowered. With a surge of renewed strength, it pushed her body forward, lunging at Jin in a desperate bid to take him down. He could see the sheer force behind the attack. It wasn't just blind aggression, it was panic. The entity inside her knew it was losing. Jin had to be cautious. If he attacked recklessly, he might end up killing her, and that was not an option. With calculated precision, he struck her in the abdomen, sending her flying several meters away. She coughed violently, staggering to her feet, but instead of retaliating, she hesitated. Her voice wavered as she questioned his actions, asking why he was helping her, especially after seeing what she had done. The weight of her crimes hung over her like a suffocating shadow, and she was certain that he had already judged her as evil. Jin confirmed that he had seen her memories, which only deepened her confusion. If he knew the truth, why was he still standing by her side? But before she could spiral further, he spoke with an air of undeniable confidence. He didn't care about what the world labeled as good or evil. He wanted to hear her story. That simple statement was enough to spark a faint glimmer of hope within her. Gathering his energy, Jin reaffirmed his conviction. Only after learning her reasons would he decide whether she was truly good or evil. With those words, he charged at her once again. The girl, still under the blood phantom's influence, prepared to defend herself. She blocked his first strike, but Jin moved with unnatural agility, slipping beneath her stance and preparing another attack. Her eyes barely had time to register his movement before his hand connected with her chin, sending her stumbling back. She tried to counter, launching a flurry of desperate attacks, but Jin was already moving again too fast. Before she could recover, he had maneuvered behind her, his presence an inescapable force. She barely managed to dodge his next blow, but the pressure was overwhelming. The celestial demon, observing everything, let out a low, amused hum. He had seen countless warriors struggle to grasp the palm and fist technique, yet Jin was naturally using it. The realization intrigued him, and for the first time, he wanted to take over Jin's body, just to see how far he could push it. His smirk widened. This descendant of his was proving to be far more entertaining than expected. Jin launched another attack, forcing the possessed girl further back. Even though she had defended herself, the sheer force behind his blows created distance between them. He knew that making a mistake here was unthinkable. He could not afford to fail. Controlling his strength was difficult, but necessary. One wrong hit could mean her death. He centered his focus, controlling his energy flow as best as he could. Then, with a steady breath, he admitted something to himself and to the celestial demon. There were things to learn, even from trash. The demon's amusement briefly faltered, his expression unreadable. Jin had just acknowledged something most warriors refused to accept, that even the lowest could have value. Jin prepared for his final strike. He surged forward, gathering all his controlled power into his palm. The possessed girl tried to evade, but she was already at her limit. The attack struck her squarely in the chest, the impact strong enough to force blood from her lips. She collapsed onto the ground, her body trembling before falling into unconsciousness. The celestial demon's eyes flickered with intrigue. Something unexpected had happened. Jin had stolen the blood phantom's power. The realization left even the ancient entity momentarily impressed. Despite never being taught, Jin had instinctively done something that should have been impossible. He had absorbed the power of the very creature that threatened him. Jin stepped forward, kneeling beside the fallen girl, his energy still radiating faintly around him. He confirmed that she was still alive. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. The air suddenly grew heavy. A suffocating presence filled the area, making his skin prickle. He turned sharply, his senses flaring. His eyes locked onto a suspicious purple aura, lingering in the darkness. Without hesitation, he summoned Rank, Iron Sword, gripping the hilt tightly. The celestial demon's smirk faded as his expression turned serious. He had been focused on Jin's battle, but now, even he sensed the shift in the atmosphere. This presence, this entity, was far beyond the threats they had faced so far. Jin's voice was steady but firm as he spoke into the night. He demanded to know who was hiding in the shadows and what they wanted from him. For a long moment, there was silence. Then a gigantic explosion tore through the battlefield. The force sent shockwaves through the air, knocking Jin back as debris scattered in all directions. His ears rang from the impact. But as he struggled to regain his footing, his vision locked onto a silhouette emerging from the destruction. A figure stepped forward, their aura thick with malice. The real enemy had arrived. The overwhelming force of the celestial demon's strike sent the blood demon hurtling backward, his body crashing through the landscape with a thunderous impact that shook the very foundations of the battlefield. Dust and debris erupted into the air, momentarily obscuring everything in a thick haze. Yet amidst the chaos, a chilling silence followed, one that carried an undeniable weight. A momentary pause before the storm could continue. The celestial demon, now fully in control of Jin's body, stood at the center of it all, his expression unwavering, exuding absolute confidence. The power that now coursed through him was immeasurable, unlike anything Jin had ever wielded. The sensation of boundless strength, the sheer force he now commanded, it was intoxicating. The celestial demon, feeling the familiarity of control over flesh once more, stretched his fingers, testing the limits of his borrowed body. Despite its imperfections, despite the fact that it was not his original form, it was still more than sufficient. The blood demon had barely had a chance to react before he had landed the strike, and that alone told him everything he needed to know. Yet the blood demon did not groan in pain, did not writhe in agony as a lesser being might have. Instead, a low chuckle began to rise from the wreckage, one that slowly grew in volume, reverberating through the battlefield in a way that was almost mocking. As the dust settled, the blood demon stood, brushing off the damage as if it were nothing more than an inconvenience. His smirk widened, a glimmer of amusement dancing in his eyes, as he regarded his rival with something akin to twisted admiration. With deliberate slowness, he tilted his head, his voice carrying a weight that sent a cold shiver into the depths of the air. He admitted, without hesitation, that he had been toying with them, that he had deliberately given them a glimpse of false hope. He had only pretended to be suffering, only allowed himself to appear vulnerable for the sake of amusement. The celestial demon, watching him carefully, did not flinch at the revelation. Instead, he simply exhaled, his smirk never once fading, as if such an outcome had already been anticipated. There was no fear in his expression, no sign of doubt or hesitation. He had long since grown accustomed to the blood demon's theatrics, to the way he always sought to distort reality in his favor. The blood demon straightened his posture, his crimson aura pulsing around him, thick with an unnatural energy that seemed to darken the very air. He acknowledged that while his rival had indeed regained some power through possession, it was far from enough. He had not fully adapted to his new body, and because of that, he would still be limited in what he could accomplish. His voice, laced with condescension, dripped with amusement as he pointed out the simple truth: he was still stronger. However, the celestial demon, still standing with an air of complete dominance, merely scoffed at such a notion. He conceded that, indeed, he had not yet fully synchronized with the body he had taken over, but that hardly mattered. In his current state, he was still in better condition than the blood demon. He pointed out with a tone of absolute certainty that his rival had already begun to show signs of weakness, that the limitations of his third body would soon betray him. The blood demon's expression darkened slightly at the remark, his smirk twitching for the briefest moment. He knew it to be true. This was not his original body, and because of that, he too was restrained, unable to use his full power. The very thought of being compared to his weakened self infuriated him, but he was not foolish enough to deny reality. He exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders as if loosening up before a fight, before locking eyes with the celestial demon once more. A silent agreement passed between them, one that needed no words. This battle would not be about strategy, nor would it be about manipulation. It would be a contest of pure strength, an exchange of raw, unfiltered power between two beings who had long since transcended human limitations. There would be no mercy, no hesitation. Only one would be left standing. Jin, trapped in the depths of his own consciousness, could only watch in stunned silence as the power that now controlled his body moved with a force he could barely comprehend. He had known, intellectually, that the celestial demon was powerful, but knowing it and experiencing it were two entirely different things. It was terrifying to feel his own limbs move with such overwhelming strength, to witness his own body unleash an attack that could shatter mountains. He realized now, more than ever, just how insignificant he was compared to the entities battling before him. If the celestial demon had truly possessed his body fully, if he had not been holding back, then Jin himself would have long since ceased to exist. The knowledge sent a shiver through his very soul. Yet, despite the fear, a part of him could not look away. A part of him was drawn to the fight, enraptured by the sheer scale of the battle unfolding before him. He was witnessing something beyond human comprehension, something that most could only dream of. And somewhere, deep inside, he knew that if he ever wanted to stand on this battlefield as an equal, he would have to ascend far beyond what he was now. The blood demon suddenly shifted his stance, his aura growing denser, heavier, as he finally prepared to engage in full combat. The celestial demon smirked at the sight, lowering his own posture. green energy crackling around him like lightning. The battlefield trembled under the weight of their power. Then, in the span of a single breath, they moved. The two titanic forces collided, their impact sending shockwaves across the air, tearing through the space around them. The sheer force of their blows cracked the very ground beneath their feet, sending ripples of energy outward that distorted reality itself. The fight had begun. The moment the blood demon uttered his challenge, both warriors vanished at extreme speed, their movements too fast for the eye to follow. In an instant, the two figures clashed mid-air, their swords colliding with a force so immense that a powerful shockwave tore through the battlefield, shaking the very foundation beneath them. The celestial demon, possessing Jin's body, narrowed his eyes, quickly assessing the situation. He knew that it would take time to fully regain his former peak, but even in his current state, he refused to acknowledge the idea of losing to someone like the blood demon. His mind was already calculating, adjusting, preparing for the inevitable outcome. There was no possibility of defeat, only the matter of how long it would take to put an end to this farce. With unwavering focus, the celestial demon lifted his hand, summoning more swords into existence, each blade shimmering with his deadly aura. Without hesitation, he propelled himself forward, launching a relentless assault against his adversary. The blood demon, despite his overwhelming power, was forced to retreat, each of the celestial swords tearing through the space around him, slicing dangerously close to his body. The celestial demon pressed his advantage, leaping toward his enemy with fluid precision, his sword poised to strike. As their weapons met once more, the two forces clashed, their attacks nullifying each other's damage in an intricate dance of offense and defense. Yet, despite his best efforts, the blood demon proved to be just as elusive. Every time the celestial demon attempted to land a decisive blow, his adversary evaded with remarkable skill. His movements refined through centuries of combat experience. Even the celestial swords suspended in the air, each programmed to attack with lethal accuracy, failed to find their mark, as the blood demon dodged them with impeccable footwork, his martial arts elevating him beyond mere reactionary defense. But the celestial demon refused to relent. His presence became even more overwhelming as he lunged forward once again, closing the distance with terrifying speed. His blade came down in a brutal arc, and this time the blood demon narrowly evaded, but not completely. A thin line of crimson appeared on his cheek, the first sign of damage inflicted upon him. Reacting instantly, the blood demon launched a counterattack, unleashing a powerful strike that forced the celestial demon to dodge in turn. However, something felt off. Jin, trapped within his own subconscious, felt an uneasy sensation creeping over him, a sense of warning that he couldn't fully understand. Then, in a split second, realization struck his adversary had set a trap. With his last attack, the blood demon had subtly pulled a nearly invisible string through the air, using it as a trigger to release an array of kunai from a concealed position. The moment the kunai were launched, they ignited mid-air, causing a massive explosion that engulfed the battlefield in a fiery storm. As the smoke began to clear, the blood demon let out a dark chuckle, his amusement evident as he observed what stood before him. His voice, rich with intrigue, acknowledged that such an outcome was only to be expected from the strongest being in Morim. He noted with satisfaction that the celestial demon had already adapted to the body of his descendant, even without much internal energy, proving once again why he had once held the title of the most feared warrior of his time. Then, in an unusual shift, he spoke in a strange ancient tongue, uttering the celestial demon's first name, a name lost to time itself. For a brief moment, the air grew thick with tension, a mutual understanding passing between them. The blood demon, standing tall amidst the wreckage, expressed his satisfaction, claiming that defeating his rival in this form would be even more interesting than he had originally anticipated. However, the celestial demon wasn't interested in his theatrics. With a cold glare, he told his adversary to stop talking, declaring with absolute certainty that the blood demon's death was already near. But his opponent merely smirked in response, dismissing the claim entirely. Instead, he stated something ominous: this war was only just beginning. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled violently, an earthquake erupting from the sheer force of the energies clashing within the battlefield. The ground cracked apart, and as if responding to the overwhelming power being exerted, the surrounding debris began to float, suspended in the unnatural gravity created by their battle. The blood demon, however, was dissatisfied. He clicked his tongue, clearly displeased that such a fight would take place in such an unworthy location. He lamented that their battle could not end in a place like this, but the celestial demon merely scoffed at his complaint, noting that it was truly unfortunate because he was giving everything he had to kill him, and yet the blood demon was still acting like a spoiled child. The remark struck a nerve. The blood demon's expression shifted slightly, irritation flickering in his crimson eyes. He acknowledged that his rival had indeed reached a level that was nearly impossible to attain, which was precisely why he had no choice but to destroy him. It wasn't just a battle anymore, it was a mission, the only goal that mattered. But then, he posed a final question, one that carried far more weight than anything else that had been said. Was this world truly the proper stage for what they were about to do? The celestial demon, unimpressed, exhaled sharply, complaining that his adversary spoke too much. The blood demon, unfazed, merely smirked, claiming that they would meet again very soon. He expressed his hope that when that time came, the celestial demon would have become stronger. The words lingered in the air, and though he wanted to dismiss them, Jin, still trapped within his own body, knew the truth. The blood demon wasn't just boasting. At their current state, even if the celestial demon had adapted to his body, even if he had retained his power, he still wasn't at his full strength. The gap between them was vast. As quickly as the battle had begun, it was over. The blood demon, deciding that this battlefield was not worthy of their true battle, withdrew. The celestial demon, despite his desire to chase after him, understood that at this distance he could not catch up. Instead, he made a choice, one that left a deep impression on Jin. He acknowledged that his current body had reached its limits, and rather than force a fight that he could not win, he chose to let the blood demon escape this time. In an instant, control over his body was returned to Jin. He gasped as he stumbled slightly, his limbs still heavy from the overwhelming power that had surged through him. His mind struggled to adjust to reality, but as he looked around, he realized something: everyone else was safe. The battle that had shaken the heavens had not claimed the lives of those around him. He exhaled, his shoulders loosening slightly, his mind racing. Was it truly over? His thoughts were abruptly interrupted as a system window appeared before him, informing him that he had completed the dungeon and had obtained the ability to absorb phantoms after successfully defeating the blood spirit. A different kind of unease settled over him. He could no longer feel the consciousness of the celestial demon within him. Had he entered a state of hibernation? Had his energy been depleted? Jin wasn't sure, but he knew one thing: this wasn't mere luck. He hadn't regained control by chance. He had reached a threshold, a limit that he needed to overcome. If the celestial demon had barely been able to keep up with the blood demon at only 10% of his power, then Jin himself had no chance whatsoever. He clenched his fist, staring down at his wrist with renewed determination. He needed to become stronger. That much was clear. But before he could dwell further, a voice called out to him. He turned sharply, his eyes widening at the sight before him. The girl from before, the one he had sworn to save, was covered in blood, her expression filled with relief and exhaustion. Before he could react, another system notification appeared. It informed him that he had obtained a fragment of the mirror of malevolent deeds. The evil within this fragment had been completely extinguished, and as a result, it would now invoke a quarter of the memories contained within it. As his vision blurred, the memory began. A young woman sat on the ground, her knees pulled to her chest, humming softly in the dimly lit room. Fear clouded her expression as the door suddenly creaked open. A figure entered, a woman holding a piece of paper, her eyes scanning the document. She frowned, irritated, as she read its contents. The girl, still trembling, could only watch as the woman's gaze darkened. Her writing scores were high, but in every other subject she had failed. The suffocating silence in the dimly lit room pressed down on Jian as she struggled to breathe, her pulse hammering in her ears. The sting of the slap still burned across her cheek. But what hurt even more was the voice, the same voice she had known since childhood, filled with nothing but disgust. Her mother's gaze bore into her, sharp and judgmental, as she spat venomous words, asking Jian how she even dared to get such a low grade. The young woman could only lower her head, fear curling inside her stomach like a parasite as she tried to form an explanation. But before she could utter a single word, another slap cut through the air, leaving her stunned. The impact was so sharp, so swift, that her body barely registered the pain before the woman's voice rose again, filled with escalating fury. Her mother reminded her of her age, 20 years old, and questioned why she was still this pathetic, why she still failed to improve as a hunter. Each word struck deeper than any physical wound. Every syllable laced with loathing. Disgust flickered in her mother's eyes as she questioned why she had even invested in someone so worthless. She regretted ever wasting her time and money on a daughter who was nothing but trash. Jian barely had time to apologize before her mother screamed at her to stop. Her voice shook with rage, warning that she was sick of hearing the same pathetic excuses. Jian flinched, instinctively preparing for another hit, and in that moment, something in her broke a little more. There was no longer any room for hope, no more naive belief that things would ever change. It was in that moment, standing there with her mother towering over her, that she realized something horrifying: no one would ever want to be the protagonist of her life. She was just existing, slowly crumbling piece by piece, and the worst part was that there was no one to save her. Later that day, she found herself sitting with a friend, recounting the scolding she had received from her mother. Her friend listened with quiet concern before sighing and offering some advice: she needed to stop bottling up her emotions. She needed to let someone in. But before Jian could even think of a response, her friend's eyes drifted to her sleeves, noticing, for the first time, that Jian always wore long-sleeved shirts, even in the heat. The question came naturally, why? Jian tensed, her fingers twitching slightly as she forced a weak smile. She brushed it off, claiming that she simply got cold easily. Her friend seemed unconvinced but chose not to press the matter further. As their conversation carried on, Jian's attention was suddenly pulled elsewhere. Her gaze locked onto something strange, a street vendor selling small trinkets, his stand carrying an eerie aura. The objects he sold were nothing particularly rare or valuable, but there was something wrong about them. A deep, bloody hue seemed to pulse faintly from the items, barely visible yet impossible to ignore. She asked her friend about the vendor, wondering why she had never noticed him before, but her friend simply shrugged, saying he was always there. It was just something well known in the area. Then, as if sensing her curiosity, the old man turned his gaze directly toward her. His expression was unreadable, yet his piercing eyes locked onto her with an unsettling familiarity. He extended a hand, holding a simple glass-like object between his fingers, and told her to buy a bracelet. Jian hesitated, confused by his sudden interest in her. The object looked so ordinary, nothing more than a cheap charm. But as she continued to stare at it, the vendor corrected her. It was not glass, it was a talisman, and she needed it. Something about the way he spoke made her skin crawl. She instinctively wanted to refuse, to step back and leave, but before she could react, her friend chimed in, admiring the piece and insisting it was a beautiful purchase. She joked that they needed luck for their upcoming exams, and maybe this talisman would bring them just that. Jian found herself hesitating, torn between her gut feeling and the normalcy of the moment. Her gaze flickered to the reflection on the surface of the talisman, and for a brief moment she saw something disturbing herself. But shattered, her face distorted across the fractured surface. A strange smile tugged at her lips. Perhaps it was fitting. Perhaps this talisman had found the right person after all. Without thinking further, she bought it. The vendor's thin lips curled into a knowing smirk, satisfied. He watched them leave, his presence beginning to fade into a crimson mist, as if he had never been there at all. Days passed, and soon, Jian found herself sitting in the classroom as the teacher prepared to call the students forward to receive their grades. The air in the room was thick with nervous anticipation, but most of the students walked up with relative ease, receiving their scores without much concern. Then, her name was called. With a sinking feeling in her chest, she rose to her feet and approached the desk. The old man before her sighed as he handed over the paper, his voice laced with disappointment. She needed to study more. She already knew what was coming, but the words still landed like sharp stones in her gut. Her eyes dropped to the paper, and her heart plummeted. Her grades had not improved at all. Her fingers clenched tightly around the page, her mind racing. The talisman didn't work. She turned to her friend, wanting to express her frustration, but her friend only gave her a blank stare. Confused, Jian asked about the glass object from the vendor, but her friend's confusion deepened. She had no idea what Jian was talking about. A sense of dread began to creep into her mind. Was she misremembering? Had exhaustion warped her memory? She tried to convince herself that it was nothing, that she was simply overthinking things. Her thoughts were cut short as she arrived home. Her hand trembled slightly as she turned the doorknob, an unexplainable apprehension building inside her. She stepped inside and announced her presence, her voice barely above a whisper, and there she was. Her mother stood waiting, her figure stiff and unmoving, her lifeless eyes staring into Jian as though they could see every flaw, every mistake, every reason to hate her. The air felt thick, suffocating. Then her mother called out to her father. With a cold, emotionless tone, she informed him that Jian had failed again. The man, upon seeing the grades, didn't hesitate. He reached for the golf club in the corner of the room. Without even looking at her, he ordered her to follow him. Jian's body refused to move at first, dread taking over her senses, but when her mother's sharp voice cut through the air, telling her to hurry up, she forced herself to step forward. The door closed behind them, sealing her fate. Her father's voice remained eerily calm as he demanded that she confess what she had done wrong. She swallowed, barely able to speak, before admitting her failure. But it wasn't enough. He demanded more, so she continued, stating that she had failed to meet their expectations, that she had wasted their money. Before she could finish, the first strike landed. The golf club slammed into her stomach, knocking the air from her lungs as she collapsed to the floor. A pained wheeze escaped her lips, but before she could regain herself, her father barked at her to get up. She weakly tried to call out to him, pleading for mercy, but her mother silenced her instantly. Her father wasn't done speaking yet. Then came the worst part. With a cold, almost disappointed expression, he told her that it was a shame. A shame that his daughter was so useless and then light. A small, glowing fragment shimmered in front of her, a fragile crystalline butterfly fluttering in the dark. A voice, soft yet suffocating, echoed in her mind, whispering the question that had tormented her for years. What did you do so wrong? Her own voice, weak and trembling, answered, "This only happens because I'm weak. If I had power, this would never happen." Pain filled her skull as something dark stirred inside her. Her parents, oblivious, only saw her clutching her head in agony. But in the depths of her mind, a voice whispered something far more dangerous. Her reflection in the mirror was no longer her own. It smiled at her and whispered, "Kill them." The air inside the room had grown suffocating, thick with tension, fear, and something far more sinister. Jian's father, gripping the golf club with the authority of someone who had never expected to be challenged, raised it once more and ordered her to accept her punishment. His voice was cold, devoid of hesitation, as if what he was doing was nothing more than a routine necessity, a disciplinary act that held no room for sympathy. But something had already changed within Jian. As the club came down toward her, her trembling hands moved instinctively, latching onto the weapon with an unnatural strength that did not belong to her. For the first time in her life, she was not cowering. Her body no longer obeyed the rules of helplessness that had been forced upon her for years. Her parents, who had always held absolute power over her, suddenly found themselves on the other end of that control. Her fingers tightened around the golf club, and her once tear-filled eyes became void of any recognizable emotion. Darkness pooled into the whites of her gaze, her pupils dilating as if consumed by something ancient, something malevolent. She no longer looked like their daughter. Her mother's breath hitched in horror, her body stiffening as she took a step back. Her father, ever the dominant figure, hesitated for the first time in his life as a chilling whisper escaped from Jean's lips. "Everything will be resolved with this." The eerie calm in her voice sent an unnatural fear crawling up their spines, but before they could react, she threw the golf club aside, its metal clattering against the floor with a sharp echo. The momentary silence that followed only made the scene more terrifying. Her mother turned on instinct, trying to flee, but the sharp scrape of metal against wood sent a new wave of dread through her. Jian had already moved. In one fluid motion, she had grabbed a kitchen knife, her grip firm, her breath slow and steady. Fury, once repressed and swallowed, now poured out of her in an uncontainable storm. Without hesitation, she lunged forward, blade in hand, her movements guided by something far beyond her own will. Her father barely managed to step back, his face contorted with fear as he realized that, for the first time, he was the one running. Back in the present, the chaos of the portal incident had left people divided. Some placed the entirety of the blame on Jian, insisting that she had tried to murder everyone within the dungeon. To them, it didn't matter if she had been controlled. Her actions had already condemned her. Others, however, were hesitant, particularly one young woman who argued that Jian had clearly been possessed. But despite her protests, a man dismissed her words with a scoff, stating that it made no difference. Controlled or not, she had attempted to kill. Her guilt was absolute. The instructor, sensing the rising tension, attempted to intervene, but Jin Suo, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. To everyone's surprise, he agreed with the man. He acknowledged that, yes, Jian had indeed tried to kill them. He understood why people were afraid, why they felt justified in blaming her. But unlike them, he knew the truth. He had felt the energy of the blood demon within her, the timing of her possession, the circumstances surrounding it. It was too much to be mere coincidence. He let out a quiet, knowing smile. This was something far greater than a simple accident. Elsewhere, the higher-ups were discussing the incident with an air of frustration. Among them were the same executives from before, who had just discovered that a rank C hunter had died inside what was supposed to be a low-rank portal. The assistant, voice thick with apprehension, informed his superior that both of them would likely face repercussions for the failure. That statement alone sent a pulse of fury through Sue, the man seated at the table, who immediately slammed his fist down with enough force to rattle everything around him. His face twisted with rage. He had worked too hard to reach his current position, and now the higher-ups would try to use this failure as an excuse to demote him. The sheer injustice of it made his blood boil. But there was no time to dwell on anger. He had to get ahead of this situation. With cold determination, he ordered his subordinate to gather as much information as possible. However, to his annoyance, the subordinate had already done so. Having uncovered key details about what had occurred inside the portal, Sue's irritation deepened. He hated being left out of the loop. But before he could reprimand anyone, a name was spoken. Jin Suo. The mention of the name immediately shifted the atmosphere in the room. Sue's anger briefly gave way to surprise. His assistant explained that Jin had been directly involved in the incident, along with an unknown entity capable of absorbing mana. At that revelation, tension rippled through the space. The assistant hesitated before voicing his thoughts. It couldn't possibly be a coincidence. Sue, gripping his jacket, made a snap decision. They needed to move. Now. His assistant, however, reminded him that this was outside of their department's jurisdiction, that he had responsibilities elsewhere. But Sue didn't care. Whether by fair means or foul, he would get the information he needed. The assistant, knowing better than to argue when his superior was in this state, simply sighed. already preparing for what was sure to be a long and complicated ordeal. Meanwhile, another figure had taken interest in the unfolding events. A woman, standing with an air of authority, asked for details on what had transpired within the portal. The gathered group recounted what they knew, explaining that the girl Jian had killed the instructor before turning on the others with a terrifying bloodlust. The woman listened carefully, taking in each word before reaching a conclusion. She needed to investigate further. Without hesitation, she turned and began walking toward Jian's location. The brown-haired girl, still recovering from the ordeal, suddenly felt an unbearable weight press down on her body. An overwhelming aura had descended upon her, thick and suffocating, as though an invisible force was binding her in place. The woman's voice rang out, sharp and unwavering, as she announced that Jian needed to be punished for harming civilians. Without waiting for an answer, she turned to the rest of the team and instructed them to escort the captives out. But before she could continue, her path was suddenly blocked. Jin Suo stepped forward, placing himself directly in front of her. His expression was unreadable, but his presence alone was enough to make the surrounding crowd tense. The woman's gaze snapped toward him, her eyes narrowing in immediate irritation. She demanded to know who he was and why he was interfering. Someone nearby answered before Jin could respond, informing her that he was Hunter Jin, a rank B who had been present in the dungeon. At that, her expression softened slightly, though her irritation remained. With a voice heavy with authority, she ordered him to step aside. If he valued his freedom, he would do well to not interfere. The girl behind him was dangerous, and she needed to be dealt with accordingly. But Jin, unmoved by her words, simply suggested that she continue her investigation at another time. Her patience snapped. With cold finality, she reminded him that he did not dictate how the investigation proceeded. She warned him not to make things more complicated than they already were. Jin did not flinch. Instead, he released his aura. The shift in the atmosphere was instant. The weight of his energy spread outward, thick and commanding. His voice remained calm but firm as he spoke, reminding her of the awakened laws. Every victim within the portal was to be protected above all else. His words carried weight, forcing her to hesitate for just a moment. But her pride would not allow her to back down so easily. She scoffed, her own aura exploding outward in response. The sheer pressure of it threatened to push Jin back, but he held his ground. She asked, with an almost mocking tone, if he truly believed that the girl behind him could be considered a victim. Before Jin could respond, footsteps echoed through the air. The woman turned, her face shifting from irritation to visible fear. Director Kim Soo had arrived. Her body tensed as she immediately stepped back, apologizing for her rudeness, realizing only too late that she had been arguing in front of him. But the man barely spared her a glance. His voice was calm, yet undeniable, as he ordered her to leave. The woman tried to object, reminding him that the authorities had assigned the case to her. Director Kim did not care. His aura alone crushed the argument before it could continue. With a voice like stone, he ordered her again, leave, now. The weight of Director Kim's presence pressed down on the woman, leaving her frozen in place. The sheer intensity of his aura, the unmistakable authority of a rank S hunter, left her shaken, her pride crumbling in an instant. She had no illusions about the difference in power between them. Compared to him, she was nothing more than an insect underfoot. Swallowing her pride, she bowed her head respectfully, her voice subdued as she acknowledged his authority. She informed him that she would report back to the department, officially stating that he would be assuming control over the situation. With that, she turned and departed, leaving an eerie silence in her wake. As the dust settled, a tension of a different kind filled the air. Two men, once the most promising students of the academy, stood face to face after years of separation. The moment of reunion was devoid of warmth, instead carrying the weight of unresolved history and unspoken challenges. Director Kim, now holding one of the highest positions in the association, finally broke the silence, offering a casual greeting to Suo. He remarked that it had been a long time since they had last seen each other, his voice carrying an undertone of something between nostalgia and scrutiny. Without hesitation, he stated that he had heard about Suo becoming a hunter and assumed that life must have been easy for him, but there was no real curiosity in his tone, only a veiled challenge. Suo, unimpressed by the insinuation, cut straight to the point and asked what his former classmate was doing there. Director Kim raised an eyebrow, surprised that Suo had not seen the news. With a smirk, he explained that he was now a director of the Hunters Association, a position of immense power and influence. Suo, unfazed, merely shrugged before asking if he expected congratulations. The tension in the room thickened as Kim dismissed the idea, stating that he wanted nothing from him. His real reason for being there was far more pressing. What he sought was the truth, a full account of what had transpired inside the portal. His voice, which had carried a hint of amusement earlier, now hardened into something cold and unyielding. Without giving Suo a chance to respond, he admitted that he was particularly interested in one specific thing, the monster that absorbed mana from the people it killed. His tone turned sharper, more dangerous, as he added that it had not been difficult to discover Suo's involvement in the matter. He did not offer Suo the option to lie. Suo, however, did not flinch. His expression remained impassive as he questioned where the proof was. The challenge in his words was clear, daring Kim to justify his suspicions. In response, Kim's grip tightened, his expression darkening. Without hesitation, he released his aura in full force, an overwhelming display of power meant to smother Suo into submission, to make him understand the level he was dealing with. The weight of Rank S energy crashed through the room like a tidal wave, its sheer intensity meant to be suffocating, but Suo did not yield. As quickly as the oppressive force settled upon him, he countered it, his own aura surging forth to neutralize it entirely. The two opposing forces collided, creating a violent, invisible storm that sent shockwaves through the space. Kim's eyes flickered with something unreadable: shock, intrigue, perhaps even mild concern. He had expected resistance, but not on this level. This was not the same Suo he had known before. The man standing before him now was stronger, far stronger. With a dangerous glint in his eye, Kim stated the obvious: Suo had never possessed this kind of power before. There was something different about him, something unnatural. His tone, now laced with irritation, sharpened as he stated that Suo's mere survival was proof enough of his involvement. Suo, unbothered by the accusation, tilted his head slightly before letting out a short, humorless laugh. His voice carried a mocking edge as he remarked that Kim's reasoning was not only flawed, but also sounded more like the excuse of a spoiled child than the logic of a director. The insult hit its mark, irritation flashing across Kim's face, but before he could respond, Suo made his own offer. He would go with them on one condition. Jian, who was bleeding far too much to endure further interrogation, would be allowed to leave on her own. Silence settled over the room as the words hung between them. Jian, trembling, barely able to stand, looked at Suo in silent horror. She had expected him to resist, to fight against their accusations, not to agree to go with them so easily. Her entire body shuddered with fear, not only for herself, but for him as well. She knew what awaited him if he followed them. And yet, he had made his choice. Kim, after a long pause, gave a slow nod, his expression unreadable. Without another word, he gestured for Suo to follow. Time passed, and they arrived at a different location, an isolated, heavily guarded office reserved for classified investigations. The assistant, who had been instructed to serve as a mediator, nervously placed 2 cups of coffee in front of them. Attempting to ease the tension, he suggested that they take a moment to relax, to talk things through like reasonable people. But before he could finish, Kim silenced him with a sharp glare, his patience already worn thin. His voice was cold and direct as he asked Suo if he was involved in all of this. The older man at the head of the table, someone with deep ties to the association, interjected, admitting that he had never heard of monsters capable of absorbing mana in such a way. He acknowledged that there were many parasitic creatures in existence, but these were something different. Suo, his expression still unreadable, finally asked the inevitable question: why was he being investigated? The answer came swiftly. Kim's assistant explained that in the last 2 portals that had been completed, 2 of these mana-absorbing entities had appeared. The association had no choice but to assume that they were somehow related. He added that he hoped Suo could understand their position. Suo leaned back, contemplating the information. He admitted that their reasoning was plausible. However, before the conversation could continue, Kim spoke again. His expression darkened as he pointed out that Suo had just admitted to rank S mana. Clearly, he was something more than what he appeared to be, but Suo only laughed. The sound was sharp, mocking, filled with an amusement that only deepened Kim's irritation. Suo remarked that it had been a while since they had last met, but some things never changed, especially Kim's annoying and arrogant personality. The insult landed with precision, sending a visible flicker of anger across Kim's face. But before he could retaliate, Suo pressed further, throwing the accusation back at him. If they truly suspected him of being involved, had they ever stopped to consider just how powerful he must be to emit the very same rank S mana they were so proud of? Then, without hesitation, Suo released his full aura. The room instantly darkened, the oppressive weight of his demonic mana crashing into them like an inescapable force. Kim's assistant recoiled in sheer panic. His breath caught in his throat as he realized something horrifying. This was not just pure mana. There was something else inside it, something terrifyingly unnatural. He barely managed to stammer out a plea to calm the situation, but Suo ignored him. He had already realized the truth. They had not brought him here to talk. They had already decided one way or another. They had planned to get rid of him. Kim remained silent, his grip on the table tightening. Suo's gaze, now cold and piercing, locked onto his former classmate. The system notification rang in his mind. Kim's breath hitched, his body tensing. His hands trembled as he looked into Suo's eyes, because he had seen those eyes before. The last time he had faced them was the day he lost to Suo, years ago. And now, standing before him, they were more terrifying than ever. In the highest seats of the stadium, the guild leaders and influential figures who had been observing the match were no longer simply curious, they were intrigued, invested. What they had just seen was not something that could be ignored. They exchanged glances, silent messages passing between them, already making their calculations, already deciding what steps to take next. There was no doubt that Jinsuo was now someone worth acquiring. Among them, H-Jung of the Death Moon Guild exhaled slowly, the faintest hint of amusement playing at the corners of her lips as she twirled a lollipop between her fingers. She had suspected there was something special about the young man from the start, but this was beyond what she had anticipated. Her companion from the HK Guild, who had previously regarded the match with mild interest, was now fully engaged, his eyes alight with the gleam of someone who had just found an invaluable treasure hidden in plain sight. He leaned forward slightly, murmuring that this boy Jinsuo was different. Jung simply smirked in response, as if she had known all along. She then turned her gaze back to the ring, watching as Jinsuo finally stepped away from the center. The match concluded, yet the tension still lingering in the air. As the reality of the outcome began to settle, the murmurs in the audience grew louder, whispers turning into conversations, conversations turning into speculation. Some insisted that it had been a fluke, that Suo had simply gotten lucky, while others dismissed such claims outright, acknowledging that what they had witnessed was the unmistakable presence of something beyond ordinary skill. Even those who had initially underestimated him now found themselves reconsidering, forced to confront the undeniable truth: Jinsuo had dominated that fight. It hadn't just been about winning. He had instilled fear into his opponent, had forced Su to retreat, had shaken the very core of his confidence, and that was a level of power that could not be ignored. Meanwhile, within the ring, Jinsuo himself remained silent, his mind distant even as the weight of his victory settled upon him. He could still feel it, that surge of energy, that suffocating presence that had overtaken him in the heat of battle. It had not been something he had consciously summoned, nor something he fully understood. The moment it had emerged, the fight had changed entirely. He had felt the shift, had seen the fear in Su's eyes, and something deep inside him had responded to it. It was as if an ancient, primal force had awakened, demanding acknowledgement, asserting its dominance without hesitation. It unsettled him, not because he feared power, but because he did not yet understand its source. The thought lingered at the edges of his mind, a question without an answer, and yet, for now, he pushed it aside. Then, movement at the edge of the ring caught his attention. Su had finally risen to his feet, his face twisted into a mix of anger, humiliation, and something bordering on disbelief. His eyes burned with resentment, yet there was also an undeniable layer of fear lurking beneath them, one that he tried desperately to suppress. He opened his mouth as if to say something, perhaps to argue, perhaps to lash out, but no words came. For all his frustration, for all his arrogance, he knew there was nothing he could say that would change what had happened. Instead, he turned sharply on his heel and walked away, his exit filled with the silent fury of someone who had been forced to acknowledge a truth they wished did not exist. The crowd parted for him, murmuring as he passed, though he paid them no mind. His focus was solely on his own thoughts, his own anger, and the burning question that now consumed him: who was Jinsuo, and what had he become? As Su disappeared into the tunnels beneath the stadium, Jinsuo took a slow breath, allowing the tension in his body to ease. He knew that this was only the beginning. This victory had not gone unnoticed, and from this moment forward, things would change. He could already feel the weight of expectation settling upon him, could see the calculating gazes of those who had once dismissed him now regarding him with newfound interest. Offers would come, opportunities would arise, but with them, so would challenges, dangers, and the ever-growing question of what lay ahead. And yet, as he stood there, looking out at the murmuring crowd, at the shifting tides of fate before him, he felt nothing but certainty. Whatever came next, he would face it. He was ready. The judge's voice rang out across the battlefield, announcing the official result of the match. The crowd erupted in murmurs, some in disbelief, others in sheer amazement. The battle between two of the Academy's most promising students had come to an end, and the victor was none other than Jinsuo. But for one person, the weight of that moment had never truly faded. As Su lifted his gaze, still reeling from the overwhelming defeat, his breath hitched at the sight before him. Standing tall, victorious, was Jinsuo, his blade still raised slightly, the air around him distorted by the remnants of his energy. But it was not just the outcome of the match that haunted him, it was those eyes. Even now, years later, as a rank S hunter, that same suffocating feeling returned with brutal force. The memory of that fateful duel burned into his mind, now perfectly mirrored in the present. The same eerie, unnatural aura enveloped Jinsuo, and his eyes, those piercing, inhuman green eyes, seemed to reach into his soul. Su could hardly breathe, his body betraying him as anxiety gripped his chest. His mind, clouded with confusion and fear, struggled to separate past from present. The weight of that humiliating loss colliding with the terrifying reality of the man standing before him now. His assistant, seeing his superior frozen in place, reached out in concern, his voice shaking slightly as he called out, urging him to respond, to do something. He reminded his superior of his title, of his strength. He was a rank S hunter, someone feared and respected throughout the hunter world. There was no reason for him to be paralyzed like this, no reason for him to falter before a mere rank B opponent, no matter how powerful he had become. But none of those words reached Su. His mind was elsewhere, consumed by a single realization that moment in the past, the battle he had lost so humiliatingly, was repeating itself before his very eyes. At that exact moment, Jinsuo felt a sudden and searing headache tear through his mind, as if something within him was resisting, screaming for control. A strange fog clouded his thoughts, and for a fleeting moment, he couldn't even remember what had triggered this confrontation in the first place. His breathing became heavy, erratic, as an unsettling thought crept into his mind. Why should I lower myself to such a level? The words formed on their own, unbidden, as if whispered by something lurking deep within him. He tried to shake off the feeling, but it gnawed at him, threatening to consume him. His ancestor's presence materialized beside him, his long hair flowing with an unnatural wind, a smirk tugging at his lips. Jinsuo's sharp gaze snapped toward him, immediately demanding to know if he was the cause of this unnatural surge, if he had been manipulating his thoughts, trying to push him into something beyond his control. But the celestial demon merely chuckled, amused by the accusation, and denied any involvement. He had done nothing but observe. With a voice dripping with amusement, he told Jinsuo that all of this, the murderous intent, the sheer dominance, the cold ruthlessness, was not something forced upon him. It was not an illusion, it was not manipulation. This was who Jinsuo truly was. The word sent a shiver down Jinsuo's spine. His head pounded as fragmented memories rushed back to him, moments of barely suppressed rage, the overwhelming desire to crush those who had belittled him, the barely restrained thirst for destruction. He had spent years avoiding this, denying it, convincing himself that he had simply been enduring, merely pushing forward. But deep down, something inside him had always been lurking, waiting. The celestial demon, for all his amusement, had doubted Jinsuo at first. But seeing this display, feeling the raw, terrifying presence his descendant had just exuded, he was finally convinced Jinsuo was truly his successor. He had potential, but it still was not enough. Jinsuo felt his heart race as the realization took hold. This murderous aura, this overwhelming intent, it was his own. It had always been there. The system had merely revealed what he had suppressed for so long. The violent urge, the willingness to end anything that stood in his way, the raw, unfiltered power of domination. It wasn't an external force. It was him. The acknowledgement sent another sharp pang through his skull, but he remained standing, fists clenched, controlling his breath, forcing himself back to reality. Kim Su, on the other hand, had already lost himself to his emotions. His pride, already shattered once in the past, could not withstand being crushed again. His assistant desperately tried to hold him back, tried to reason with him, but Kim Su exploded in anger, his voice shaking with barely restrained fury. He refused to allow history to repeat itself. He refused to let Jinsuo walk away unscathed after humiliating him once more. He declared that he would challenge him again, that this time he would not lose. But before he could fully commit to his reckless decision, his assistant reacted faster than he could process. With a brutal swing, his fist connected with Kim Su's face, sending him stumbling back in shock. The sudden impact jolted him, snapping him out of his rage-induced haze. With a sharp voice, his assistant berated him, telling him to wake up. He reminded him of the reality of the situation, telling him to listen to the words he had just spoken. He had become obsessed with something dangerous, something far beyond his understanding. For all his pride, for all his anger, he had failed to recognize what was right in front of him. Jinsuo was not someone he could defeat right now. It was a bitter truth, but a truth nonetheless. And for the first time, Kim Su was forced to acknowledge it. His shoulders tensed, his expression twisting into something unreadable as he turned his gaze back to Jinsuo. And then, he did something unexpected. He apologized. His words were stiff, filled with resentment, but he forced them out regardless. He admitted that he had lost control, that he had acted irrationally. But his pride would not allow him to simply let this go. Even though he accepted his temporary defeat, he would not forgive Jinsuo. Not now, not ever. He reminded him that he was still under investigation, that the questions surrounding his sudden surge in power had not disappeared. Jinsuo, unaffected by the threat, merely shrugged. He had expected as much. The conversation took a sharp turn as Kim Su asked him a direct question. Did he want them to stay quiet about what had happened? About who he really was? About the girl he had protected? Jinsuo's eyes narrowed slightly at the words, realizing that this was what it had all led up to. They were finally getting to the point. Kim Soo, still visibly bitter, exhaled sharply before finally conceding. He would not report anything to the authorities, not about Jin Suo, not about the girl, but this was not out of kindness. The truth was, Kim Soo himself was still under investigation. His own involvement in recent events, particularly the growing connection to the mana-absorbing creatures, meant that he was in no position to make demands. In a way, they were both trapped within the same system, forced to watch their every move carefully. As the tension began to ease, Jin Suo let out a small breath, adjusting his posture as he prepared to leave. He had no more interest in this conversation, no reason to linger. He had already won the only battle that mattered. And with that, he turned his back on Kim Soo, on the investigation, on everything that had just transpired. Whatever came next, he was ready.
The grand hall fell silent as a robed figure slowly approached the glowing altar in reverence. Murmurs rippled among the guards. No one expected him to arrive today, especially not so boldly. Kneeling before the altar, he bowed his head deeply, whispering a name only he remembered clearly. With trembling hands, he touched the sacred box, awakening something ancient sealed beneath the golden cloth. A voice echoed from above, a descendant cannot cry, as divine energy surged, flinging the lid skyward. A single tear betrayed him despite the divine bond. Grief from the past still clung tightly. He raised both arms, signaling the crowd. The ritual's next phase had begun without interruption. A wave of spiritual energy passed through the room, seizing the cultists with uncontrollable awe. Their chants grew louder. The saintess's presence now dominated the room, her influence spreading like wildfire. Behind the spectacle, a hidden figure smiled. This reaction was not a miracle, but carefully constructed manipulation. The priest gripped the blade tightly, pressing it against his hand to complete the blood offering. He raised the weapon above his head, demanding a miracle in front of the entire congregation. The weapon plunged downward. An unexpected strike pierced the altar, triggering a powerful explosion of radiant force. The platform cracked violently. Light surged outward as energy waves pushed the priest and followers into confusion. Chunks of stone collapsed as divine energy burst free and uncontrollable force awakened beneath the holy structure. He smiled, sensing the power stirring. His long-awaited moment was finally coming to life before him. Fingers trembled as they gripped the altar's edge. Someone was rising from within the shattered ground. From the light and rubble, a woman staggered forward, wounded, breath heavy, dress soaked with blood. She opened her mouth slowly, struggling to form words, still weakened by the summoning process's cost. A firm hand grabbed hers, steadying her stance. She wasn't alone in this awakening after all. A surge of light pulled everyone's attention. The cultists looked up, alarmed by the sudden force. Among the observers, two acolytes stepped forward, stunned by the rising energy radiating from the central altar. Their eyes widened as the woman stood tall, her presence now pulsing with undeniable sacred energy. They realized what it was. The long-lost divine power of the saintess had truly returned to her. Bathed in light, the saintess opened her eyes, aware, resolute, and no longer bound by weakness. The cultists celebrated wildly, unaware they were pawns, believing her return was truly for their salvation. Their chants filled the temple. "Long live the saintess," they cried, unified in worship and ignorance. The priest approached her with confidence. "Smile, Yeon," he said, demanding compliance masked as a religious instruction. He reminded her of her role. She must act joyful, even if her heart remained unwilling. Though uncertain, she lowered her gaze and replied, "Yes, Father Raymond," hiding discomfort behind a practiced nod. Raymond raised his voice again, shouting, "Long live," using her presence to strengthen his control further. His satisfied grin grew wider as the crowd echoed, unaware of the silent figure entering the room. A mysterious man in black stood quietly, observing everything as chants of the saintess still echoed. His expression remained cold. He had no interest in the worship, only in the truth behind it. Suddenly, a sharp clash echoed, an interruption signaling that something was about to shatter the ritual's momentum. The dark-clad intruder launched forward, blades spinning with deadly precision toward the guards blocking his path. Metal clashed violently as his swords moved unnaturally fast, each strike guided with terrifying speed and accuracy. With one clean motion, he struck two attackers down, overwhelming them before they could react or defend. From a distance, a stunned boy watched. He had never seen swordsmanship executed with such supernatural control. The warrior never touched the weapons, yet they danced flawlessly. This wasn't normal Muram technique. It was something else. The white-haired man mocked calmly, amused by his opponent's struggle and confident in his absolute superiority. He declared the boy too weak, barely a sapling, unable to reach someone of his martial level. Charging forward, the young fighter ignored the insult, aiming to break through the relentless sword barrage anyway. Frustrated by the pressure and constant interference, he yelled out. Unable to concentrate under the verbal taunts, swords clashed rapidly around him, their movements tightening, forcing the boy to dodge desperately from every direction. The airborne blades closed in faster, circling above like hunters closing on their trapped prey below. The boy's breath hitched. As one sword came dangerously close, he couldn't keep dodging much longer. He deflected a strike mid-spin, but the impact forced him back, breaking his stance completely. A blade shot straight down, stopping inches from his chest. He froze, realizing the duel was over. Seeing no chance of winning, a bystander raised his hand, shouting nervously, "Time out to halt everything." Exhausted, the boy dropped to the ground, declaring he needed rest after the brutal sword trial. The elder mocked him with a smirk, calling him weak despite acknowledging his own overwhelming strength. The boy caught his breath and looked around, still in disbelief that everything was just an illusion. The elder confirmed it easily, explaining it was simple for him to manipulate space and perception. He warned the boy to remain hidden from the Hyola and train harder before confronting reality. The elder criticized modern hunters, calling dungeons meaningless. The boy stood up, clearly tired of the lecture. Frustrated, he snapped back, insisting he understood. Even as a B-class hunter, recognition didn't come easily. He admitted the power spike against he was accidental. His martial energy had briefly surged out of control, believing the strength wasn't truly his. He explained why he rejected letting the elder take full control. Still seated, the boy sighed at the relentless nagging, then noticed something buzzing faintly around his left wrist. The boy checked his device, confused by a strange alert flashing urgently across the screen. Suddenly, a powerful presence closed and his expression changed instantly as he sensed something wasn't right. The elder stepped forward, concerned, asking what had startled him and triggered such a serious reaction. Before the boy could respond, the elder's face lit up with a sudden spark of realization. Far away, a scarred man watched through a monitor, grinning coldly. "Now this is intriguing," he said. A message arrived on Suho's phone. Kim's body had been found in a Gangnam alley. Authorities suspected magic absorption by unknown monsters, a theory growing common after similar unexplained deaths. They urged Suho to cooperate if he knew anything, hinting his silence could imply involvement. The reply mentioned a possible link to a religious group, pushing urgency to catch the culprit. Suho hesitated as flashbacks hit gruesome faces. Blood. Fire. He clenched the phone, mind racing with dread. Suho clenched his jaw, emotions building. He still hadn't shaken off what the messages had shown. The elder noticed his hesitation but stayed calm, gesturing with a smile. "Let's go," he said softly. A portal opened instantly. Swirling with light, the transition between realms was swift and without resistance. Without delay, Suho launched into a sharp strike, unleashing energy the moment they landed in the field. The elder frowned, surprised. "What are you doing?" he asked. Confused by Suho's sudden aggressive action, Suho turned away confidently, declaring they should move, his tone dismissive, clearly not waiting for permission anymore. The elder narrowed his eyes. "How impertinent," he muttered, surprised by Suho's lack of formal respect. He criticized Suho's behavior, questioning how the younger generation had lost reverence for their superiors completely. Suho silenced the lecture with a blunt command and checked a message as his phone beeped. He sent a quick reply, "I'm coming. Send me your address," already shifting his focus to the next mission. A crime scene drew a public crowd. Officials had cordoned the alley, raising media attention rapidly. A black vehicle stopped near the tape. Inside were agents assigned to investigate the recent incident. The media surged forward, cameras rolling. The atmosphere grew tense as speculation about the case intensified. Suho stepped out, confirming the alley matched the location tied to the mysterious body found earlier. Law enforcement held the crowd back while investigators prepared to secure physical evidence and trace remaining magic. A man forced his way through the crowd. Tension rose immediately as others turned in surprise. Gasps followed his appearance. The man was Kim, the well-known and feared director of the institute. Onlookers instinctively moved aside. His reputation for aggression made people reluctant to question his authority. Suho and his partner observed his arrival. They hadn't expected someone so high-ranking to appear personally. While the director acknowledged Suho, he noticed an unfamiliar face nearby. Clearly puzzled by the unknown presence, an investigator stepped forward, preparing to explain the findings as officials gathered beyond the caution tape. He confirmed the report's accuracy. The victim's condition exactly matched the documented symptoms found at similar scenes. The body showed signs of total energy depletion, every trace of life force completely extracted without resistance. It wasn't ordinary mana loss. This extraction left nothing behind, a process far beyond known magic theory. Director Kim turned to Suho, seeking insight. The pattern resembled dungeon incidents, but something felt entirely different. The elder scanned the corpse using aura control, his expression tightening as he examined the damage. The victim's abdomen was entirely destroyed, vital energy centers ruptured beyond recovery by an unnatural external force. The elder concluded survival was impossible. The wound's nature reminded him of previous Hyoma-related attacks. Suho agreed silently. The pattern confirmed their suspicion, bringing clarity and urgency to their investigation. The team prepared to secure the area. Their leader ordered both the press and civilians removed immediately. After leaving the scene, the investigator reviewed the victim's profile to determine their next immediate lead. The victim was Cha Myung-sok, age 38. His wife, Quen Yu, was the only listed cohabitant. She became the primary contact. The investigators decided to question her for background and potential leads. She answered the door calmly, showing no visible distress as she welcomed them into the apartment. Without prompting, she spoke first, claiming she hadn't noticed anything strange about her husband's behavior recently. Inside, the investigators listened as Quenyu explained her husband's sudden devotion to an unknown religion. She believed he attended a normal church and respected his choice, never questioning where he truly went. Suho pieced together the pattern: late returns, changed habits, then complete disappearance right before the fatal discovery. She confirmed everything. He vanished without contact, and she hadn't seen or heard from him since. Leaving the building, the team acknowledged they gained nothing new, just another case unfolding the same predictable way. Suho explained they'd been investigating the religious group, but all attempts to track them failed completely. Despite thorough checks, the organization had no registration, no physical address, and no formal online presence. If they were legitimate, records would exist. Instead, everything pointed to a hidden or deliberately erased group. No one knew where they met, how they operated, or who controlled the secretive inner circle. The agent found it unsettling. Suho smirked faintly. It reminded him of something more dangerous than religion. Suho smiled faintly, intrigued by the mystery. The strange cult activity sounded like something he could handle. He expressed interest in taking it on. Something about this case aligned with his personal goals. His suggestion was met with doubt. His partner questioned how he planned to approach something so vague. Another investigator warned them both. Even with agency support, tracking unknown cults came with serious, unpredictable risks. Suho tilted his head, unbothered. He knew the danger, but especially if it was religious, he wouldn't hesitate. He hesitated, raising a concern. He still wasn't convinced Suho was suited for this operation. Suho turned to face him directly, reminding him that he was brought in for this exact reason. Confidently, Suho urged him to trust his skills. He wasn't here to play things safe. He paused. He shifted his tone, admitting something else had been bothering him since their first meeting. With narrowed eyes, he asked Suho plainly what organization did he actually belong to before being assigned. Director Kim recalled a familiar name. Suho had once been his junior during academy training years ago. He clarified Suho wasn't just a former student, but also a colleague on previous assignments. Suho's expression darkened. That part of his past wasn't something he liked to revisit openly. A memory surfaced: a massacre in a sacred hall. Corpses sprawled in blood, too many to count. Among the bodies, a younger Suho held someone close, trembling in denial, overwhelmed by the carnage. Suho held the wounded girl tightly. Her breathing slowed as blood soaked through his trembling hands. A voice behind him spoke quietly. It was already too late. There was nothing he could do. Despite the warning, Suho frantically tried to stop the bleeding, unwilling to accept the final moment. Someone approached him from the shadows. Calm and composed, he watched Suho's desperation with detached sympathy. The figure knelt beside him, voice steady: "Give it up. You can't save her. Accept it." Young Suho stared at her lifeless face, frozen in shock. As the weight of failure hit, his vision blurred. Time slowed. The silence was overwhelming, grief gripping him tighter with each breath. Her final gaze burned into his memory. It would haunt him longer than any wound ever could. Years later, a pamphlet echoed her last moments, offering salvation through belief, promising false hope to strangers. In a crowded street, a smiling man handed out flyers, pushing faith like a practiced salesman. A curious woman skimmed the pamphlet, intrigued by its strange promises cloaked in religious language. The message challenged mainstream faith, criticizing blind belief and blaming miracles for failing to prevent past tragedies. With dark red visuals, the text intensified, offering prayer, peace, and salvation for humanity's forgotten and fallen. Under the banner Church of Salvation, it claimed unity and purpose for all who felt abandoned. On stage, a speaker declared NM Corporation's full backing, blending religion with business through a grand announcement. News reported a major fundraising effort: 20 billion won collected in the name of charitable salvation. A priest approached the silent woman, claiming every donation reflected people's desire for her divine grace. He insisted the world didn't need miracles, just one gesture, a sign, or her spoken word. The priest reached out, physically halting her escape, reinforcing the idea that she couldn't remain passive. His fingers brushed her chin. Control masked as reverence. He demanded cooperation dressed in religious manipulation. The priest leaned in, voice calm yet forceful, urging her to act for everyone's salvation. She stared upward, eyes full of conflict, barely holding back, as pressure mounted with every word spoken. Suddenly, her eyes widened, panic or pain erupting her body, reacting to something unseen but overwhelming. A dark figure watched from the shadows as the priest repeated his mantra, salvation for all. As red energy surged, the girl's expression twisted, gritting her teeth, suppressing something deep, violent, and awakening. Tears fell as her throat tightened. He tightened his grip, demanding obedience masked as divine authority. Suho introduced the man with a flat tone, recalling how they'd once fought side by side. They glared at each other, years of unspoken blame and betrayal simmering just beneath the surface tension. He remembered the moment clearly. Everything changed the night she died, and the team shattered forever. The newcomer tried diffusing things with humor, noting their strained past sounded more tragic than professional history. Suho offered candy without emotion, concealing his suspicion behind politeness, while testing the man's reaction carefully. He arrived at the investigation site, eyes scanning the tall building, mind replaying long-forgotten tragedies silently. His partner noticed a sudden change in demeanor triggered by a location that once hid brutal events. Years ago, he survived a devastating incident here. The sole escapee after a massacre left many dead. Now a detective, he carries scars of the past, using them to sharpen instincts rather than mourn. The memory fades as duty returns. He resumes the investigation, masking pain beneath practice, determined movements forward. The lead investigator questioned his plan, skeptical about infiltrating a dangerous cult known as Church of Salvation. Calmly, the man revealed he possessed a rare ability, something capable of uncovering hidden threats with precision. He explained that his ability made detection easy, but he insisted on working alone under strict terms. When asked to explain further, he declined, offering cooperation only if granted full autonomy for 48 hours. With 2 fingers raised, he stated his condition clearly. He needed exactly 2 days to complete the task. He repeated his demand 2 days, no interference, stating it clearly while holding up 2 firm fingers. The agents reacted with frustration, doubting him. They demanded proof, questioning the nature of his mysterious ability. They feared public exposure and the consequences of failure, unwilling to gamble without knowing what he'd do. He calmly acknowledged their concern, warning that one mistake could provoke retaliation and jeopardize their entire investigation. Privately, he noted that the cult only knew vague details: Chianma, the blood, and nothing more, yet. Despite their pushback, he smirked faintly and dismissed the tension. Doubt and resistance weren't new to him. His nonchalant attitude confused them. They expected anger, but he simply accepted the distrust as familiar behavior. He confronted their informality, reminding them they'd dragged him into this mission without prior discussion or approval. Tossing something aside, he pointed out their arrogance, pretending to understand everything while withholding crucial context from him. Resigned, the agent sighed deeply and gave in. Cooperation wasn't ideal, but he'd find a way through. He glared sharply, drawing a line. Whatever came next, they would receive no further help from him. Suho acknowledged the boundary without resistance, accepting that cooperation had reached its limit for both sides. He called for Detective He to follow, preparing to proceed independently with his own planned investigation. But he was stopped. The other agent insisted Suho couldn't work alone while still under their authority. As Suho walked away, doubts lingered. The remaining agents questioned if things would spiral out of control. He lit a cigarette, exhaling calmly. Though stepping aside, he made it clear he wasn't endorsing anything. The Institute was in disarray, and their research had yet to deliver reliable or actionable results. Turning to he questioned whether one could really entrust their fate to someone they didn't trust. He admitted he wouldn't. The other man agreed it applied to him as well, no exceptions allowed. With narrowed eyes, he concluded, someone unproven shouldn't be free to act without oversight or consequence. Suho walked deeper into the forest, sensing the strange aura as something ancient began to stir. He declared his approach different: less force, more control. His methods would expose the cult's secrets silently. Meanwhile, in the city, someone observed Suho's actions with curiosity, recognizing an unusual pattern in motion. The cult's leader admitted Suho wasn't a threat before, but now his strength had drastically increased. A subordinate questioned if Suho was an enemy. The leader, amused, asked if they'd seen his eyes. In the void-like realm, he remembered the moment he looked directly into Suho's glowing, unnatural eyes. They weren't human. Those eyes carried something ancient, dangerous, beyond comprehension. A presence no normal person could endure. The warning was clear: if this case fails, Suho would become executioner, no questions asked. The long-haired man acknowledged the danger calmly, already aware of Suho's nature and the inevitable risk. Still, Suho smirked faintly, dismissing the fear. To him, the prophecy sounded exaggerated and absurdly dramatic. The long-haired man walked beside he, speaking casually, his words dragging out pieces of buried history. He questioned whether others should have acknowledged he's past sacrifices, suggesting they'd forgotten everything he endured for them. He froze. The implication struck deep. His jaw clenched, and he gave a cold command to stop. He warned the man firmly. Some topics weren't open for discussion, especially not from someone like him. Unbothered, the man smirked with disdain. To him, his sensitivity over the past was exhausting and dull. The spirit circled he, acknowledging his presence, curious whether he truly understood the path ahead alone. He questioned he's odds finding the Hydra with his current abilities was near impossible without external aid. He agreed it was difficult, but made it clear failure was guaranteed without the spirit's cooperation. The spirit seemed skeptical, unsure why he should help, unless, of course, he allowed possession in return. He laid down terms instead: mutual cooperation, no shortcuts. If Chiyama wanted control, he had to earn it. Chiyama smirked slightly, finally agreeing to cooperate, acknowledging that the current situation demanded mutual compromise. However, he warned Suho, continued resistance during awakening would make obedience far less likely over time. Suho understood the cost. Dual control wasn't possible. Power came at the price of personal dominance. Chianma clarified the final truth: when the moment of reckoning arrived, hesitation would mean nothing. In that moment, only the strong would endure. The weak would be erased without mercy or pause. The scene was sealed by police. Suho and Cheonma arrived at the site of the attack, and standing over the body, Suho declared it was time to begin tracing the creature's path. Cheonma instructed Suho to pour his energy into the corpse to activate the hidden tracking ritual. Though only a spirit now, Suho's body would soon adapt under pressure. It would accept Cheonma's power. A system prompt appeared, access restricted. Only partial memory could be viewed, with dizziness as a consequence. Suho confirmed the prompt. Despite the warning, he accepted the risks and activated the fragmented memory sequence. A powerful current surged through him. His body reacted instantly, surrounded by wind, noise, and glowing energy. The force overwhelmed him. Vision blurred into swirling shadows as reality collapsed and the memory began manifesting. A system notification appeared mid-transition, playing memory, as the world around him turned dark and unstable. Suddenly, he was slammed into a new space and unknown place, scattered with clues and scribbled diagrams. Nervously biting his thumb, the man cursed his source. He'd been promised reliable intel, but got nothing. Panic set in. He feared losing High-In and had no backup plan to salvage the deal. He slammed the desk, pacing. The pressure was too much. Everything was spiraling beyond his control. A sound startled him. He turned toward the door, demanding to know who had entered unannounced. A composed man appeared, smiling. He claimed to know the problem and offered a solution in return. The businessman questioned the visitor's knowledge. He hadn't mentioned his failing company to anyone, not even officially. The man smiled and responded calmly, introducing himself as a believer of the Church of Salvation. He described their faith's source of power as saintess who connects with the divine and performs miracles. The businessman stared in disbelief, wondering how they knew so much. But desperation kept him listening quietly. Under the influence of light, his hesitation faded. His eyes narrowed. Slowly, he whispered one word, yes. He rambled passionately about his new faith, while his partner watched with growing concern and disbelief. She questioned his well-being, worried he was too deep into something he didn't fully understand. He snapped, shouting that she never listened. His obsession was growing louder and harder to control. She tried to reach him once more, but he stormed off, muttering the word Saintess. Voices chanted her name, blood splattered. The cult's presence had already consumed him body, mind, and soul. The cult gathered in a hidden chamber, preparing a ritual beneath a glowing mural of unknown origin. One figure approached the altar, entranced, fully surrendered to the presence emanating from the sanctified platform. The saintess was revealed elevated and radiant. The congregation reacted instantly, collapsing into unified, near-frenzied devotion. Their chanting intensified, echoing through the chamber. Each voice merged into a singular declaration of unwavering loyalty. Observing in secret, Suho fell to his knees, overwhelmed. He realized the saintess truly existed again. Suho's breath caught. His mind rejected what his eyes saw. Someone long gone stood before him. It was Yuyeon, unchanged, silent, and radiant. The woman he lost now stood as the saintess. Blood slowly pooled across the cold floor tiles. Suho stood motionless, unable to process the horror. He knelt beside the fallen figure, breath shaking, hands trembling, his mind racing through what just happened. Clutching the bleeding wrist, he tried to stop the flow, whispering broken words of apology and fear. The man stirred faintly, bloodied lips moving. Suho leaned closer, desperate to catch every faint word spoken. Tears welled in Suho's eyes. He had heard enough. This death wasn't accidental. It was betrayal. The memory sequence terminated. Jiun Baek's stored thoughts had finished uploading, leaving behind only fading data traces. Suho's connection to the artificial memory broke. He returned to reality, stunned by what he'd witnessed. The ground beneath him felt real again. His hand dug into the dirt, stabilizing his spinning thoughts. In front of him stood the enemy, calm, composed. Suho recognized him from within those memories. Now it was clear every tragedy in his past was orchestrated through Hyoma, targeting him from the start. The white-haired man dismissed any justification for the rogue's betrayal, refusing to acknowledge the deeper motives. Still, he admitted the rogue's actions might have been a calculated move to eliminate Suho early. Suho processed the implications. The betrayal wasn't recent. It had roots planted far back in his past. A name surfaced, Yuyeon Baek. The pieces started fitting together, pointing toward a web of hidden intentions. Years ago, Suho met her sister, Jiun. At the academy, she was part of his team. Suho learned Jiun wasn't just involved, she was directly tied to the case he was investigating. Her status had changed. She was now honored publicly as a saintess in the Church of Salvation. The revelation hit Suho hard. Doubts crept in. Could all of this truly connect back to him? The white-haired man saw through his reaction, smirking knowingly. He knew what Suho feared deep inside. Suho quietly confirmed it. Yes, it was possible. His past might have changed others more than expected. Suho tightened his fist. The truth about Jiun, the Hyoma, and his past overwhelmed his thoughts. The white-haired man dismissed the revelations. To him, past conflicts and betrayal no longer held importance. Suho stood with new purpose. His investigation shifted, no more waiting. He would confront the Hyoma directly. There was no resistance. The man gave no objections, silently acknowledging Suho's decision to pursue vengeance. Yet his gaze lingered. He watched Suho closely, hiding his own intentions behind a calm expression. As Suho walked away, the observer noted his resolve. His mental strength surpassed all earlier expectations. There was curiosity now why such determination. But Suho had no doubts, only a goal in mind. He had learned enough. The clues he gathered pointed clearly to the people aiding the Hyoma. They were no longer out of reach. Suho now knew exactly where to find their base. He whispered a quiet plea. If a higher power existed, he wanted strength to face them. Alone in her room, Yeon sat quietly. Her thoughts drifted toward memories she tried to suppress. Disturbing visions surfaced, cloaked figures gathered in secret, their red robes and painted faces twisted in devotion. Their chants echoed in her head. Fear and confusion from the past still haunted her deeply. She trembled, eyes shut tight. The weight of silence and memory made it hard to breathe. Turning to the window, she whispered longingly, wishing her sister Jiyoon was still there beside her. Yuyeon stood in the snow, haunted by guilt. Her hand reached toward memories buried too deep. She once dreamed of becoming a hunter to protect others, but now felt twisted far from that path. Clutching herself, she trembled. Doubt filled her heart as shame replaced the pride she once carried. Past voices returned, cries of pain and regret echoed in her mind, reminders of her failure. To silence the past, she reached for cleansing water, desperate to wash away guilt and tears. At the orphanage courtyard, children laughed as Jiyoon gently reminded them to be careful while playing again. One girl admired Jiyoon's healing skills, expressing her dream to awaken as a supportive hunter like her. Jiyoon reassured her with confidence, encouraging her to believe in herself despite not awakening yet. She explained how genes affect awakening, suggesting the girl might even develop a better ability than hers. The girl looked up, hopeful and smiling, asking for confirmation. Jiyoon responded without hesitation, believing in her. Jiyoon smiled gently, knowing this might be her last calm moment before leaving the orphanage behind. She hugged a younger child tightly, trying to give warmth and reassurance without revealing her own sadness. Jiyoon reminded her not to fight and to behave, hoping those words would help ease the separation. The girl sensed the truth. Her voice trembled as she realized Jiyoon was truly leaving for good. Jiyoon struggled to stay strong. One look back almost made her stay, but she turned away. Jiyoon knelt down, calmly explaining that growing stronger meant sometimes stepping away from those you love. She asked the younger girl to be strong too, reminding her of their shared dream of hunting. To chase that dream, Jiyoon said she needed to leave without worrying about anyone crying behind her. She gently wiped the tears away, asking the girl to be brave and let her go. As the tears stopped, Jiyoon gave a final smile, hopeful the child would follow her someday. She wondered if things would have changed if Jiyoon hadn't left. Would her own fate be different? A message arrived unexpectedly. Her hand trembled as she read the words no one wants to hear. Jiyoon was gone. The news hit like a blow. Her mind struggled to process the loss. They said dungeon magic collapsed, unleashing monsters. The team was overwhelmed. Jiyoon didn't make it out alive. Numb and silent, she closed her phone. Something inside her hardened. That day, her path shifted forever. Yuyeon stood in silence, staring into the void, hoping to hear Jiyoon's voice just once more. The memory shattered Jiyoon. Her only family was gone. No answers would ever come from her again. As her powers awakened, energy surrounded her hands, but it came too late to save Jiyoon. Yuyeon's awakening brought no joy. There was no one left beside her to witness the moment. She stood alone in her light. What should have been hope, instead marked the start of emptiness. A man approached the girl calmly, his expression warm. He claimed to work for the orphanage. He identified her immediately, Jiyoon Baek's younger sister. Her soft reply confirmed the connection he seemed eager about. Introducing himself as Raymond, he assured her gently. But something in his tone felt too rehearsed. He smiled politely, but his eyes revealed something deeper. This place, he said, was his beginning. With a strange intensity, he made a request, one that would shift everything Yuyeon thought she understood. Raymond extended his hand, suggesting Yuyeon could follow Jiyoon's path, joining something greater, just like her sister. The mention of Jiyoon startled Yuyeon. She hesitated, unsure if this was the right direction for her. Hearing she could become like Jiyoon stirred hope. She longed to match her sister's strength. Raymond confirmed it with ease, reminding her that as Jiyoon's only sister, she carried great potential too. Yuyeon's hand moved slowly. A pause. Doubt flickered, but the desire to be useful remained strong. Yuyeon grabbed Raymond's hand firmly. She accepted, thinking she could help others like her sister once did. Her only condition was clear. She wanted to heal and support people, not chase power or fame. Raymond grinned darkly. After that moment, he insisted she address him, not by name but as father. Yuyeon was led into the Church of Salvation, unknowingly becoming a messiah within a hidden cult. Though her power was only healing, others worshipped her, mistaking her awakening as a divine gift of salvation. Yuyeon curled into herself, despair setting in. Despite her power, she felt helpless, unable to save anyone. Elsewhere, Suho arrived at the orphanage. His steps were firm. He knew this was the place. Standing before the gate, he confirmed aloud this was the location tied to the Hyoma's growing power. Beside him, the white-haired man clenched his fist, He sensed it too, the Hyoma's presence was undeniable. Suho narrowed his eyes. The energy here felt stronger than before. Something powerful awaited them inside. Suho narrowed his eyes. He had sensed someone nearby. The atmosphere shifted with quiet, creeping tension. In the shadows, the white-haired man grinned. The moment Suho arrived, everything had started to unfold. Raymond extended his hand calmly, radiating energy. He prepared to confront the cult with unwavering determination. He stood alone, thanking them mockingly as chants echoed. The crowd roared, unaware of his real intent. A fervent cultist raised his fist, shouting praises. Red eyes glowed, devotion boiling into dangerous fanaticism. Another voice trembled in blind faith, echoing the chant. A child shivered, frightened by their growing madness. Raymond gripped his sword, silent but firm. Now was the moment to act and end everything. The young priest activated a forbidden technique, gathering power from the altar's core through precise hand movements. Dark energy responded to his call, forming a vortex. The cultists watched silently, unaware of his betrayal. An explosive force burst outward. The protective circle shattered, sending loyal cultists flying across the ritual chamber. As smoke cleared, survivors staggered upright. Confusion grew. Was this part of the ritual or an attack? The priest stepped forward, expression hardened. His true mission: dismantle the cult from within, starting with disruption. Unnoticed by most, a stranger entered the temple hall. His presence felt off. Tension filled the air. A blue-haired man observed the newcomer calmly, aware he wasn't one of the regular summoned believers. The title Heavenly Demon's Descendant surfaced. Whispers spread. Was this figure a myth or the real threat? Confusion broke out among acolytes. The temple's barrier had never been breached, not even by summoned enemies. As panic grew, someone recognized Raymond. His return meant judgment. The priest demanded silence from the crowd. Raymond's warning was dismissed. Suho stood firm, refusing to entertain mercy from a corrupted religious order. Suho stepped forward with confidence. He had infiltrated deeper than expected, already exposed by news media. Accusations flew. Suho condemned the cult leader for hiding tyranny behind scripture, rejecting any claim to sanctity. Tension rose. The leader realized Suho's intent wasn't peaceful. He hadn't come to debate but to destroy. Raymond responded calmly, hand moving toward something hidden. The conversation had ended, preparation for conflict had begun. Raymond clenched his jaw. He sensed Suho's hostility. Clearly it was no visit of peaceful intent. Meanwhile, a girl stirred in a hidden chamber, alarmed by the sudden tension beyond the walls. She whispered, confused. "Yuyon Baek?" Suho's voice reached her ears, confirming he was somewhere close by. Recognition jolted her body. The voice was real. Fear and hope surged together in her chest. Suho stepped forward boldly, eyes fixed ahead. "He knows she's here," he declared, voice calm and certain. Another cult member emerged from the shadows, eyes fixed on Suho, alarmed by his defiant tone. Raymond protested Suho's boldness, accusing him of blasphemy for calling the saintess by her real name. Suho answered firmly. The girl was never divine. She was labeled falsely and exploited for their gain. The cultist's rage erupted. Face flushed red. He couldn't tolerate Suho's accusations against their sacred foundation. Drawing his weapon, the cultist charged forward, shouting to defend the saintess's name from perceived desecration. Suho entered the main sanctuary. Cracked tiles marked his steps. The atmosphere shifted as tensions surged. The cloaked believers screamed at him. "Heretic!" they shouted, demanding he leave before corrupting their space. Unshaken, Suho stared them down. One follower trembled as Suho questioned their blind dependence on faith. He challenged them directly, asking if hollow belief in the saintess truly helped anyone escape real suffering. Enraged, the crowd accused him of blasphemy. Fear turned to hostility, and the sanctuary began to stir. Suho barked furiously. He couldn't stand watching deluded followers submit to false hope and cult pressure. He called them weak for needing idols, commanding them to seek real strength outside this broken place. Suho condemned their hypocrisy, protecting a cult while imprisoning a girl too young to make choices freely. The priest snapped. To him, every believer had chosen this place to overcome emotional or personal burdens. He rejected Suho's authority, demanding the outsider leave. Suho stood firm, unmoved by emotional appeals or threats. Raymond panicked as a strange energy erupted. He hadn't expected Suho's power to manifest this aggressively. A shockwave burst forth. Raymond stumbled back while Suho remained still, controlling the surge with perfect focus. Green spiritual energy swirled violently. Apparitions formed, fragments of martial will gathering behind Suho, enforcing his heavenly bloodline. Suho glanced toward the cultist crowd. He accepted it now. Using this power was his only option. Raymond froze as Suho's force closed in. A spirit arm extended, grabbing him before he could even react. A spectral figure appeared beside Suho, instructing him. It recognized him as heir of martial power. The spirit mocked the cult, calling them Hyoma scum. Its hatred for them was clear. Raymond stared at Suho, stunned. The presence behind him was ancient, vengeful, and clearly beyond his understanding. A burst of light exploded above. Confusion erupted as whispers spread. A blackout? Was that magic? The cloaked followers flinched. Fear crawled in. Something was shifting. Suho's presence had broken their blind certainty. As the elevator sealed, Suho escaped underground with Yuyeon. The sanctuary was left in chaos. Cult members realized Raymond was missing. Their leader had vanished, leaving them exposed and without direction. An undercover officer embedded in the crowd signaled the team. It was time to move in. Law enforcement arrived swiftly. The operation had been coordinated, every exit covered to prevent further escapes. Officers confirmed success. Suho had led them to the cult's core, making full arrest possible. Some agents were reluctant, complaining about the assignment. They hadn't expected to confront a real cult. Meanwhile, a cultist staggered through the halls. Injured but determined, he shouted to help others escape. Ignoring warnings, he pulled out a small device. He intended to delay pursuit at all costs. He activated the device. It emitted energy, forcing others to flee while he braced for consequences. The device exploded with force, knocking him back violently. Chaos spread as agents scrambled to react. The flare device detonated, igniting the hallway. It created a wall of fire to delay pursuit. Flames surged rapidly. One cultist was caught in the blast, his body consumed before he escaped. Screams echoed. Survivors recoiled in fear as smoke thickened, panic spreading faster than the flames themselves. Outside the chaos, an agent calmly addressed the detained cultists. Their resistance had officially ended here. Handcuffs hit the ground. The officer demanded surrender. No more speeches, just orders and a quiet end. Agents watched Suho from a distance. His power had grown rapidly, beyond what they'd anticipated before. One agent silently vowed never to confront Suho again. Fear replaced doubt after witnessing his strength. Elsewhere, a cultist stumbled into unfamiliar terrain. The forest was dense, sunlight filtering strangely through golden mist. He wandered further, disoriented. Nothing looked familiar. The transition from the sanctuary had been sudden and unexplained. A figure emerged, calm but ominous. It explained this place was no longer connected to his world. A new figure approached Raymond calmly. His presence disrupted the strange dimension's silence with deliberate intent. Raymond demanded his identity, unsettled by how suddenly and silently the stranger had appeared before him. The man addressed Raymond directly, asking about the Hyoma. He clearly knew more than he let on. Raymond staggered. The stranger spoke a name he thought was hidden. Panic began building behind his eyes. Uncertainty gripped Raymond's thoughts. The forest shimmered unnaturally. Something about this realm and this man felt entirely wrong. The forest trembled violently. A strange force pulsed beneath the earth, shaking Raymond's balance and confidence. Raymond sensed danger. He muttered in disbelief, realizing this realm wasn't natural. It rejected his spiritual authority. He stepped forward cautiously. This time, he wouldn't flee. But even he sensed things had fundamentally changed. Suddenly, blinding green energy surged skyward. Lightning twisted into a spear of power, aimed directly at him. The entity reappeared unchanged and resolute. With cold authority, it commanded Raymond to answer without lies or resistance. The Guardian glared down at Raymond, hand raised. Judgment was near, and lies would not work here.